Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Strategic Planning Committee. Sorry for the slight delay in starting, just getting everybody in the room and seated, but we're ready to go now. So we'll kick off with the agenda then. So the first item is the membership of the committee. We've had apologies from Councillor Moore. Councillor Anwar's here. Do you want to sit here, Councillor Anwar? Okay, so we've got everyone else is here. Minutes of the previous meeting. I wasn't here then, so I'll defer to the rest of the committee. You're happy with those? Everybody happy with the minutes? Okay. Declarations of interests and lobbying. Just quickly go around on that. Councillor Sokol, anything?
Nothing to declare.
Councillor Anwar?
Nothing to declare, thank you.
No lobbying, Chair.
Councillor Thompson?
No lobbying, Chair.
Nothing, sir.
I've just had an email from Councillor Crook on item 13. No action taken. Okay, it was a public meeting. Everybody's here, and that's fine. Okay, item 5, deputations and petitions. Got anything?
No deputations or petitions, Chair.
Okay, so moving to the planning applications. We undertook some site visits this morning, those have all been completed. So we can move on to item 11, the planning application at Cliff Hill, Denbydale. Hand over to Victor.
Thank you, Chair. Victor Grayson, Development Management Master Planner in the Majors and Minerals team. Presenting item 11, which is a planning application related to Cliff Hill, Denbydale. As the membership of the Strategic Planning Committee has recently changed, this presentation today will be a repeat of the presentation I gave at the last committee meeting on the 16th of May, albeit with some additional slides and commentary. Members will be aware that at that meeting, the Strategic Planning Committee deferred its decision for the reasons set out at paragraph 1.3 of the latest committee report, and which I will come back to. As explained at the last committee meeting, this is an application for a residential development of 62 dwellings at the largest part of the HS 144 site, which is allocated for residential development in the local plan. This application has been brought to committee due to the number of representations received. It follows a previous application for a development of 48 dwellings at this site, which was considered by the Heavy Woolen Planning Subcommittee last year and which was refused for 7 reasons, which also I'll come back to. In this slide, the plan on the right-hand side shows the site allocation in orange. The area labelled A is the current application site, and this covers the larger part of the site allocation, as well as 2 slithers of land along the Cumberworth Lane frontage. B is a separate site that has planning permission for 10 dwellings. C also has had a separate planning permission granted and has been developed not so long ago with 6 dwellings that have been built there in a new gated cul-de-sac development named Springhead Gardens. And then finally, D is the last part of the site allocation for which no planning permissions have been granted. The application site is approximately 1.9 hectares in size. It slopes downhill from north to south towards the centre of Denbydale. It is a greenfield site. It's currently grassed agricultural land with some trees and hedgerows. Surrounding land is in agricultural and residential use. The green belt and a public footpath border the site to the north, and to the west is the Grade 2 listed Wesleyan Methodist Church. In these 2 long views, in these 2 images, we see how the site is visible in the wider landscape. The top image is the view from Barnsley Road on the opposite side of Denbydale, overlooking another allocated site. Members can hopefully see the Wesleyan Methodist Church, to the right of which is the application site. Members can also see their Springhead Gardens, that was area C in the earlier slide. And then in the bottom image, perhaps a bit more clear, is another view from Barnsley Road, further to the west, overlooking the Churchfield open space. Again, members should be able to see the Wesleyan Methodist Church, as well as the relatively recent East Hill Way development to the west of this application site. These are photographs of the west end of the application site, showing Cumberworth Lane, the site's frontage to that road, and the Wesleyan Methodist Church. And for these photos, I'll go clockwise from the top left, starting with that first image in the top left. That's a view of the track to the north of the application site where it meets Cumberworth Lane. This track carries a public footpath northeastwards up towards Leek Hall Lane. Then we see a view looking into the site from that public footpath. And then in the bottom right-hand corner is the TPO protected tree that exists within the application site. And then finally, we see a view from the public footpath looking south across the land that was annotated D in the earlier slide. And you can just see the last house on Leek Hall Crescent visible in the left of that image. These 4 images show existing dwellings adjacent to the application site. The top 2 images show dwellings that were mentioned in the previous reasons for refusal. Crook Cottage, that's a single-storey dwelling to the south of the application site, and the dwellings of Springhead Gardens to the southeast. Dwellings on Chapel Court are located to the southwest and are accessed from Cumberworth Lane. Dwellings in the bottom right image are accessed via the track to the north of the application site. Just regarding topography, shown here is the applicant's topographic survey, which illustrates how the site slopes downhill, albeit with a mound towards the centre of the site close to the public footpath. And this slide summarises the 7 reasons why the previous application for 48 dwellings was refused last year. Paragraph 6.1 of the committee report summarises the key changes made by the applicant to address these 7 reasons for refusal, and as set out in the latest committee report, further information has been submitted by the applicant regarding the reasons related to mineral extraction. The applicant's proposed layout of the current 62-unit scheme is shown here. This has not changed since May. A single vehicular point of access is proposed from Cumberworth Lane, from which an estate road would extend into the site, splitting into 2 arms in response to the site's topography. At the end of each arm, pedestrian connections to the adjacent public footpath are proposed. A mix of detached, semi-detached and terrace properties is proposed. They would comprise 3 1-beds, 12 2-beds, 24 3-beds and 23 4-bed properties. Publicly accessible open spaces are proposed around the site's TPO protected tree, that's the red dashed circle, and are also proposed above the proposed surface water attenuation tank and either side of the proposed site entrance. The 3 red crosses on this plan denote the locations of historic mine entries. This slide shows a sample of the 10 house types proposed by the applicant. 2-storey dwellings are proposed across the site, although 8 units would have 3-storey rear elevations due to the site's topography. Pitched roofs are proposed across the site. The majority of the dwellings would be built of artificial stone, however 4 dwellings at the west end of the site, nearest to the listed building, would be of natural stone. And this slide shows the proposed site entrance on Cumberworth Lane. This site entrance would have new footways either side of it, facilitating safer movement for pedestrians along this part of Cumberworth Lane, where there is currently no footway. Taking into account traffic speeds outside the application site, the visibility displays proposed either side of the site entrance are considered adequate. Highways Development Management officers are satisfied with these proposals in terms of highway safety. And just to clarify, members, acceptance or the recommended acceptance of providing access off Cumberworth Lane is not recommended because the applicant has been unable to acquire land to the north, which would have enabled a vehicular access to be provided off Leek Hall Lane. It's recommended to be accepted because of the design of this site entrance is acceptable in highway safety terms. Regarding other highway issues, Highways Development Management officers have also advised that the proposed internal layout and resident and visitor parking is now acceptable. Regarding the 2 previous reasons for refusal which related to overlooking of neighbouring dwellings, the applicant has moved the relevant dwellings away from those neighbours and has submitted these drawings illustrating the proposed relationships. And then with regard to Crook Cottage, the applicant has highlighted that topography and intervening boundary treatments would prevent overlooking of the rear windows of that single-storey dwelling, despite less than the expected 21-metre distance being maintained between the relevant elevations. So those are the plans illustrating the relationships with those neighbouring properties, and these are the sections submitted by the applicant illustrating those relationships. This slide illustrates the locations which are considered appropriate for the development's 12 affordable housing units. These are proposed at the site entrance and at the termini of the 2 branches of the proposed estate road. This slide breaks down the unit size mix of the proposed affordable housing. This hasn't been changed since May. The tenure split of the affordable housing element is considered acceptable. The unit size mix of the 7 affordable rent units is compliant with the expectations of the Council's Affordable Housing and Housing Mix SPD. The intermediate element is not compliant, as highlighted in red here. However, the Council's Strategic Housing team have advised that this mix can be accepted at this site. As a reminder to members, and as per paragraph 1.3 of the committee report, these were the reasons for the committee's deferral of their decision on this application last month. I'll return to each of these points shortly. However, before doing so, I'll provide some reminders of the challenges at this site, as well as more information about the site investigation that the applicant has carried out here to establish what lies beneath it in terms of coal and voids where coal has previously been mined. Most of the site is within the development high-risk area, as defined by the Coal Authority. It is known to have historic mine workings beneath its surface, including those 3 mine entries denoted by red crosses in the plan shown earlier. Under the previous refused application, the applicant proposed extensive extraction of coal from the site, described as being tantamount to open cast mining. The previous committee report referred to the extraction of 12,000 tonnes of coal from the application site, and this matter was included in the Council's previous reasons for refusal, with concern being expressed regarding the environmental impact of such large-scale extraction at this site. Under the current application, different proposals have been set out in relation to remediating the site and making it stable. The committee report provides more detail of the proposals, but in summary, the applicant now proposes grouting to fill the voids beneath the site, capping of the site's 3 mine entries, and excavation of part of the site. Just as a reminder to members, I'll use this term grouting quite a lot this afternoon. Grouting involves pumping or injecting a liquid grout, which is similar in some ways to concrete, made of pulverised fuel ash, cement, sand and water into the voids that exist beneath this site. The grout is then allowed to set and harden, and as a result the land is then sufficiently stabilised to support the development proposed above. Members will be aware that strong concerns have been raised regarding this aspect of the proposals in representations received from local residents, from the Upper Dearne Valley Environmental Trust and the 3 ward members. Regarding site investigation, I didn't show this slide at the May committee meeting, but I think it would be useful. This plan is not new information. It was submitted when this application was submitted in July last year. This plan shows the extent of site investigation carried out by the applicant, and each of these dots with acronyms, annotations and acronyms refers to a different type of hole that was dug or sunk by the applicant team. For example, TPs, those are the blue dots, are trial pits, which are usually dug to a fairly shallow depth, either by hand or with a digger. ROs, which are the yellow dots, are rotary open hole boreholes. For example, those are just 2 of the types of holes that have been dug or sunk at this site. And in each of these annotated locations, when following the digging or sinking of the hole, the findings were then set out in diagrams like these. Members, I can zoom in if need be, because I appreciate that it will come out quite small on the screen. This is just a sample of the findings at 3 of the holes that were dug or sunk by the applicants. The intention here is to provide members with just an idea of examples of what was actually found beneath the site. There are pages and pages of these diagrams, so obviously I won't be showing you all of them, just three examples here. So for example, trial pit 10, which is the one in the, well, you can see it's annotated trial pit 10, TP10 there, illustrated on the left. That was dug to a depth of 1.3 metres and the site investigator found first 30 centimetres of topsoil, beneath which there was sandstone in the form of gravel and cobbles. Then trial pit 13 beneath it is shown here in the bottom left. Members can see there that beneath 45 centimetres of topsoil, intact coal was found. Now this is worth noting, members, because as coal is combustible, where it's found so close to the surface of a development site, that is a problem. It's a safety concern. It will need dealing with before that part of the site is developed. Coal that close to the site poses a fire risk, and the solution in that part of the site would be to either dig out that coal or provide 1 metre depth of inert, i.e. non-combustible material above it to address that risk. And also that approach would need to be applied to service trenches for services dug across the site as well, where that coal is present close to the surface. And then on the right are the applicant's findings in the upper part of borehole 7. Boreholes are usually sunk to depths deeper than trial pits, usually. Of interest here, beneath 20 centimetres of topsoil and 8 metres or so of sandstone and mudstone, a void was found. This is likely to be a historic coal mining excavation, and it is these voids beneath this site that would need to be grouted, i.e. filled, to stabilise the land so that development on the surface can then be implemented. Now I'll just jump back to that plan. Obviously these holes that were dug or sunk don't cover every inch of the site. They never do in these site investigations. To know exactly where all the voids, all the remaining coal and all other materials exist beneath a site, an applicant would have to fully excavate it, which would be a disproportionate effort. The level of site investigation carried out by this applicant, as illustrated here, is normal and proportionate and is considered adequate for the purposes of informing the Council's decision on this application. But because the site investigation holes don't and can't cover every inch of the site, some assumptions have to be made as to what exists between the various points where the site investigation has probed the ground. So, informed by the site investigation findings, the applicant team have drawn up these sections, which include the gathered information, but which also fill in the gaps with reasonable assumptions as to where coal seams and voids exist and extend beneath the site. So, for example, members, if you look at the top right image, you can see that there is a borehole that found coal. That's the black mark in that column. And from that, going across the site along that section line where a void was found, the applicant has assumed that there was a coal seam and possibly still is a coal seam or a void underneath that part of the site. Again, this is the normal approach for sites like this. So the applicant has prepared these four sections, four of these sections, two of them are shown here, in which members can see these red dotted lines denoting where the applicant has reasonably assumed coal and voids extend between the site investigation points. It is this site investigation and mapping that has informed the applicant's figures regarding how much material would be removed from the site and how much material in the form of grout would need to be brought to the site. These slides and commentary also explain why the applicant can't reasonably be expected to put an absolutely precise figure on either amount. There is always a degree of assumption involved in calculating what needs to be done at a site like this, where there is coal and coal mining legacy beneath the surface, and officers are satisfied that the applicant has provided informed best estimates in response to this committee's queries and reasons for deferral. Informed by that site investigation, this plan shows the excavation proposed at the centre of the site, which is necessary to remove coal that is too close to the surface and to create developable platforms. In response to a criticism levelled at the last committee meeting, this plan has been updated to show the latest proposed layout, although the purpose of this plan was actually to show the extent of the proposed excavation. Members should note that this plan does not include the excavation that would be needed to accommodate the proposed on-site attenuation tank, which is shown there in the east corner of the site, and which would have a capacity of 729 cubic metres. This is the applicant's proposed grouting plan. It does not show the latest layout of the development shown at the surface, proposed at the surface. However, it usefully illustrates the applicant's proposed approach to grouting, where grout would be injected via drilled holes spaced 3 metres apart. That's the red dots and the orange triangles in this diagram, underneath where new dwellings are proposed. And also, grouting will be injected into holes drilled 6 metres apart where roads are proposed on the surface. The drilled holes will be approximately 6 inches in diameter. Tracked rotary rigs, similar in size to some 360 excavators, will be used for this grouting. There will be up to 3 of these rigs on site at any one time, and there is an example illustration of such a rig on the right here. And then this slide shows the level changes proposed across the site. You can see where the section line is shown in that inset image in the top right hand corner. So this is a site section taken along the site's north to south downhill slope. So in answer to this committee's first reason for deferral, the amount of material, and I call it material as it may be a mix of coal, soil, sandstone, clay and shale that may need to be removed from this site, has been put at 4,400 cubic metres by the applicant. The applicant has stated, however, that this figure is likely to change as works progress and as more information becomes available. This amount is not considered unusual for a development of this size and nature at a sloped site where there are existing voids and seams near to the proposed surface level. Achieving appropriate road gradients also usually necessitates excavation and changes to levels at such sites. In answer to this committee's second reason for deferral, the amount of grout to be brought to the site has been put at 1,650 tonnes by the applicant. Again, this figure is likely to change as works progress and as more information becomes available, and a more refined estimate may be calculated following additional borehole investigations. In response to this committee's third reason for deferral, which was regarding how these operations will be carried out, I've already referred to and illustrated the applicant's grouting proposals. The applicant have also provided figures for the number of HGV movements that will be necessary in relation to the proposed excavation and grouting. These are 550 HGV loads of material being removed from the site, so that means 550 movements in and 550 movements out, and 83 HGV movements in and 83 HGV movements out, bringing grout material to the site. A construction route plan has been submitted by the applicant recently, showing HGVs moving to and from the nearest higher order road, or A road, which is Wakefield Road, the A636 to the south, rather than northwards via Lower Cumberworth. Removal of material from the site would take 8 weeks, and grouting would take at least 2 months, say the applicants. As mentioned last month, residents' concerns regarding the potential impacts of those works are valid, and appropriate conditions intended to protect the amenities of residents during those phases are recommended. Full wording of those conditions is now provided in the committee report. The applicant has agreed to adhere to the working hours recommended by environmental health officers, and as noted above, appropriate HGV routing has been proposed by the applicant. These are the ways in which the committee's fourth reason for deferral relating to impacts on residents would be addressed. Regarding other considerations relevant to this application, drainage and flood risk has been raised as key concerns in many of the representations received from local residents. However, the lead local flood authority, who are aware of the applicant's grouting proposals, have advised that the proposals are now acceptable, as downstream improvements to the relevant watercourse have been carried out, and acceptable on-site attenuation and an acceptable discharge rate have been proposed by the applicants. Environmental health officers now consider the proposals acceptable in relation to site contamination, mine gas, readings of which have confirmed is currently negligible, noise, dust and other environmental impacts subject to conditions. The site's TPO protected oak tree would be retained and worked around. The council's ecologist has confirmed that the applicant's biodiversity net gain calculation is correct, and members will note that the securing of a financial contribution regarding that matter is recommended. And related to that matter, and more widely, the required Section 106 agreement, under this application, the applicant initially submitted financial viability information in support of a claim that the proposed development could not provide any affordable housing or Section 106 agreement, Section 106 contributions. However, the Council's consultants reviewed this information and concluded that the development could in fact provide the required 12 affordable housing units and Section 106 contributions. The applicant decided not to contest this, and the full complement of necessary obligations is recommended in the committee report. 55 representations plus one more this morning. All objections have been received in relation to this application. Significant amendments have been made following the previous refusal of planning permission and during the life of the current application to ensure relevant planning concerns have been addressed. The proposed development relates to a site allocated for housing and would contribute to housing delivery in the borough, which is a key consideration, not least given the tilted planning balance that now applies in light of the borough's current housing supply situation. Approval of full planning permission is recommended subject to conditions and the completion of a Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Victor. Okay, so we'll come on to public representations on this. So when I call your name, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. If you can turn your microphone on by pressing the button at the bottom with the sort of mouth, the speech button. You'll have 3 minutes to speak, so there's a timer there. Once you do past 3 minutes, I'll ask you to stop. Okay. So the first person is Emma Dimbula. First.
Chair, councillors, good afternoon. I'm a resident of Springhead Gardens, which borders the site to the south, as we've seen on the plans, and I object to this application. I'm also a commercial litigation solicitor. In my view, this application is flawed from the outset because the proposed site entrance does not accord with the conditions set out in the Kirklees local plan. It's well documented that during the local plan hearings in 2018, Planning Inspector Katie Childs insisted that vehicular access to this site must be off Leek Hall Lane due to safety concerns with Cumberworth Lane. Helen France of Udvet, that's the Upper Dearne Valley Environmental Trust, was in attendance at the hearings and a witness to those discussions. Following this, the inspector's report to the council included modifications to be made so the plan was sound and legally compliant. And it says, the council indicated that access may be facilitated via Leek Hall Lane. Subject to this modification, the allocation is soundly based. This is confirmed in the local plan, which states the provision of a pedestrian footway is required across the site frontage at Leek Hall Lane. The council's report and adoption of the plan confirms the inspector's recommendations are binding. This application with site access at Cumberworth Lane doesn't meet the conditions of the local plan and so should be rejected. Mr Grayson in his report thinks the inability of the applicant to secure the parcel of land connecting the site to Leek Hall Lane is a material consideration and therefore the plan can be departed from. It isn't. A material consideration is concerned with land use in the public interest. Access was determined by the planning inspector based on the safety of the public. The applicant's commercial inconvenience is not a material consideration and doesn't outweigh the safety of the community. At the last committee meeting, Mr Grayson sought to justify the site entrance at Cumberworth Lane by saying the condition in the local plan referred to creating a pedestrian access at Leek Hall Lane, not vehicle access. That interpretation doesn't stand up to scrutiny. Firstly, because it's evident that the discussions at the original plan hearings were about vehicular access, and secondly, because the original wording of the draft local plan simply stated the provision of a pedestrian footway is required across the site frontage, i.e. build a pavement perpendicular to the site entrance. There is currently not a pavement either at Cumberworth Lane nor Leek Hall Lane, and so the only explanation for adding in the words the site frontage at Leek Hall Lane was that the planning inspector required that be the main site entrance. In my opinion, approval of planning permission would likely be overturned at judicial review on this point alone, and so I ask the committee to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thanks. So next it's Quinn Little.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Good afternoon, Chair, councillors. I'm a resident of Springhead Gardens, which borders the site, and I object to this application. Plots 43 to 46 on the site plan are positioned too close to existing properties on the adjacent Springhead Gardens, and being of a 3-storey design and sitting at a much higher level than Springhead Gardens will cause significant loss of privacy to existing residents. The planning application shows a boundary retaining wall at the point where this land meets the 3 Springhead homes' own boundary point, standing at over a 2-metre differential in topographical height above our garden land, 176 metres versus 174 metres, with the level of the new houses and garages having a first floor level of another 4 to 6 metres above this, standing at over 180 metres. The first planning application in 2022 was refused on this ground and stated that these plots are at a topographical level and distance from the existing properties whereby their rear windows and garden terraces would significantly overlook and reduce the privacy of the existing residential properties at a significant detriment to residents' amenity. It goes on to say that the identified impacts on privacy in respect of levels and separation distances are contrary to the House Builders Design Guide and Kirklees Local Plan Policy LP24. The new plans do not address this issue. The plots have been moved slightly, but do not overcome the loss of privacy to existing residents caused by the 3-storey design, coupled with the topography of the site. Mr. Grayson's report to this committee acknowledges that at least one of the plots does not achieve the minimum separation distance with the neighbouring property on Springhead Gardens and the plot's garden terraces, which was specifically included in the ground for refusal in the first application, remaining at the same distance. Furthermore, Mr. Grayson's report to this committee states that the required separation distance is 21 metres. In fact, this is the typical minimum distance required in the House Builders Design Guide for 2-storey houses. These are 3-storey houses. The House Builders Design Guide at paragraph 7.21 states that longer distances may be necessary if the site includes higher buildings or the steep topography of the site, presenting particular challenges relating to overlooking, which is clearly the case here. The height and position of plots 43 to 46 is therefore inappropriate and contrary to the Local Plan Policy 24 and the House Builders Design Guide, and will impact significantly on the privacy and amenity of existing residents on Springhead Gardens. As there is a principle of consistency in planning decisions, with planning history being a material consideration, and I suggest that this previous ground for refusal has not been overcome by the new plans, and I ask the committee to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Sarah Ogden. Thanks.
Hello, I am a local resident of Lindle Moore Road, and I'd like to talk about the dangerous access on Cumberworth Road. In his report, Mr. Darwin states that Cumberworth Lane, near the proposed site access, is sufficient to allow a HGV and a light vehicle to pass. What is not clear in the report is there is insufficient room to allow 2 HGVs to pass. Cumberworth Lane is a bus route, a designated route for HGV quarry lorries, and a route used by HGV lorries with long trailers travelling to a transport and storage facility which is located half a mile uphill from this site. The images in the traffic assessment are not representative of the site entrance and quite misleading. With relating to braking distances, it is a concern, and if things are not clear, how can the risk of a road traffic collision have been fully assessed when the report is based on wrong assumptions? Although Mr. Darwin states that there is sufficient space for RCVs to turn into the development, he has failed to consider the turning room needed for construction traffic, which we have heard there will be a lot of. These vehicles notoriously need a much wider turning space. They will encroach on the opposite narrow carriageway and very likely the existing narrow footpath, which is less than 1 metre wide and backed by a high stone wall. What happens when these large vehicles meet other large vehicles using the road? Much is made of the proposed 2 new lengths of footpath either side of the entrance, that they are an improvement. They're not. The road is very narrow here, and HGVs and buses have to travel with their tyres in the gutter, with large wing mirrors at risk of hitting pedestrians. Currently, large vehicles, including buses, move into the centre of the lane to avoid pedestrians, just at the point where the relocated pedestrian crossing south of the entrance is suggested. Furthermore, the safety audit for this access has only included 2 half-an-hour visits at off-peak times. This is inadequate, and it does not reflect the volume of traffic that will be generated by this junction. Denbighdale does not have good public transport links. It is a car-dependent area for commuters and residents. In addition, the report has failed to consider the impact of increased traffic posed from other local developments in Denbighdale that Kirklees Planning has recently approved. over 60 dwellings at land at Inkerman Court and 10 dwellings at land off Cumberworth Lane, whose entrance is less than 50 metres south of this application entrance. This access point contravenes paragraphs 114B and 115 of the MPPF. It's simply too dangerous to use Cumberworth Lane as a site access, and I urge you to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you. So next it's Neil Denby.
Councillors, I'm a local resident and parish councillor. Essentially, this is a proposal for a noisy, traffic-heavy industrial site involving coal extraction in the heart of a rural village. It will scour the village for years, block a major access road to the village centre shops and businesses, and result in unacceptable levels of noise pollution, traffic pollution, air pollution, loss of amenity, both visual and natural. It's an unsuitable site that should not be developed just because Kirklees has not reached its housing targets. The latest response of the applicant to the legitimate concerns of residents and councillors, I believe, is unsatisfactory. The latest questions put to the applicant have not been substantively answered. The rig, for example, which they provided a photograph of, I looked that up and it operates at a noise level of somewhere between 95 and 105 dBA, which is considered dangerous. And yet there is no noise mitigation in there for local residents or for anybody else. The applicant's response, as stated, is based on an assumed thickness of a seam, an assumption that 30% has been worked, which arrives at an approximation which the applicant says is likely to change. Nevertheless, it still states that 4,400 cubic metres of coal, or around 1,400 tonnes, will be extracted. If the applicant's estimates are only slightly inaccurate, this figure could be substantially larger. For example, if only 10% of the seam is worked, then there will be approximately 2,000 plus tonnes of coal, and all the estimates regarding timescales, traffic movements and pollution are totally unviable. There's no evidence yet provided of where the coal will be disposed of once it has been mined. If it's to be sold, the income's not been anywhere declared. If it's to be combusted, this is contrary to Kirklees' environmental policies and current priorities. Thus, the submission is contrary to policies LP11, LP20, LP28, LP30, LP49 and LP63 of the Kirklees local plan. The proposed site remediation strategy creates unknown residual environmental impacts and unacceptable risks that have still not been adequately assessed. No grouting plan has been provided for the proposed layout. The plan submitted relates to a development of 48 houses, which was previously rejected. The development will be at a substantial risk of subsidence, as no grouting is proposed beneath private gardens, beneath shared open spaces, and only minimal grouting is proposed beneath the development's estate roads. No mitigation for nearby properties is proposed. No overriding community benefits have been identified which would make the extraction of coal acceptable. Kirklees Council's own priorities include an ambition for net zero and cannot possibly condone commercial coal extraction.
Thank you. So next is Nicola Tiffany.
Good afternoon. I'm here today to address two critical objections to the planning application under consideration. The first is to reinforce that whichever way we look at this is a reworked proposal for an open cast mine, which has already rightfully been rejected by the planning authority. Whilst Kirklees have determined that the level of investigation is proportionate, the use of language in the developer's application, the more recent responses such as likely to change as more information becomes available and more refined estimates will be calculated, leaves this planning consent, if granted, wide open for the developers to proceed with a significant mining operation with no or little regard for the risk to the local community and specifically the neighbouring properties. The resubmitted application and answers to questions resulting from the recent deferral do not materially differ from the original proposal in terms of the coal extraction and its overall impact on our local community's health, safety and the environment. I therefore urge the committee to ensure that consistency with previous planning decisions and reject the application on the basis that the underlying concerns that led to the initial rejection still exist. Now, the second is questionable intent, which could significantly impact both the 5-year land supply and the financial contributions to be derived from the Section 106 agreement. As you may be aware, the land in question was listed for sale by the prospective purchaser without the landowner's knowledge earlier this month and removed from the market shortly after. Whilst the sale itself is not a material consideration relevant to the Council's determination of the planning application, the sequence of events raises significant concerns about whether the development will indeed go ahead at all. Seeking to sell an option to purchase even before obtaining planning permission or conducting further testing to determine the viability of the site suggests a lack of commitment and low level of confidence in the development capability of the land, which is not surprising given the sheer amount of unknowns evidenced in the application. As expected, there are significant financial obligations stipulated as part of the required Section 106 agreement, but if the development is delayed due to a planned sale or does not proceed due to the land being unsuitable for development, any planning principles that may have been overridden due to the value of these financial contributions would be rendered moot, as the contributions may be transferred, delayed, or even nullified in the event of a subsequent sale. Furthermore, if the developer's confidence in the viability of land is low enough to consider a disposal of the site before planning has been secured, and there is a significant risk of the development not going ahead, the committee should not consider the 5-year land supply as a material planning consideration to this application, and the council should instead look to other sites which are capable of delivering against the house building targets. The objections raised today, not just by me, but also by the other speakers, are not just technicalities, but rather substantive issues that strike at the heart of the planning process. Approving this application would set a precedent that undermines transparency, consistency, and adherence to established planning regulations. Thank you.
Thanks. Very well timed. Jack Little, next.
Good afternoon, Chair, Councillors. I am a resident of Springhead Gardens, which borders the site, and I object to this application. I am concerned that this application includes a plan to remediate the site by way of coal extraction, but which has no substantial detail on how that will be achieved. It will in effect be an open-cast coal mine in the centre of the village and bordered on 3 sides by existing properties. In the local plan, there is a presumption against development identified as being a risk of instability and where there is evidence of contamination, for example by methane gases present in coal seams, which could cause harm to people or the environment. The National Planning Policy Framework requires that the planning regime should prevent new development from contributing to or being a risk of unacceptable levels of soil, air, water or noise pollution or land instability. Clearly, these are all risks of open seam coal mining, which are unacceptable in the location proposed due to the village location and close proximity to neighbouring properties in the site. There is nothing in the application about the risk or impact of this proposed activity to existing properties which sit merely a few metres away from proposed mining activity. The applicant will use excavation and vibro-compaction techniques which will shake and cause instability to our properties. How will we be compensated for the inevitable damages to our homes? Will we need to resort to litigation, and is the council prepared to allow development which so clearly puts existing residents and their properties at risk? It is for the detailed planning process to determine the suitability for development of any local plan allocation. The allocation stage did not guarantee suitability of any site, and in this case, more detailed investigations have shown the sites to be unsuitable for development. Particularly due to the proposed coal mining activity, the first application was refused on that basis and should be refused again. Planning law states that there must be consistency in decision-making. Nothing has materially changed in relation to the site remediation plan since it was refused in the first instance. If the land cannot be developed without resorting to coal extraction and the risk to existing properties, residents and the environment associated with it, then it is submitted that the land is not fit for development. Neither is there an overwhelming community benefit in coal extraction at this site, contrary to the requirement in National Planning Guidance and the Kirklees local plan, and therefore I ask the committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we've got Richard Littlewood. Can you turn off your microphone as well, please? Thank you. It's Richard Littlewood next. Cheers.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Concerns over the development. My home is only metres away from the proposed site, and I have 7 items I'd like to bring up. The proposal contradicts clause 1511 of the Kirklees local plan. This clause does not support the opening of open cast excavation of coal waste, which is needed to remove in some areas 1.4 metres deep of coal. Secondly, local plan policy LP36 says that coal waste excavation will not be permitted if it causes nuisance to local residents. Nuisance is created by the significant generation of noise, dust and vibration, along with long-term health issues such as breathing difficulties, emphysema, COPD and silicosis. Thirdly, the removal of the coal waste seam will cause ground movements. The test holes carried out to date have already caused subsidence to the gardens of numbers 275 and 277A Cumberworth Lane. Fourthly, the proposal involves significant grouting of voids in the ground. This will reduce natural drainage. The rear of properties backing onto the site on Wakefield Road have already flooded in the past. This problem will be accelerated. Fifthly, the land in question is the home to nesting birds, bats and even wild deer. What will happen to these if the proposal goes ahead? Sixthly, I feel the entrance is unsafe. Visibility displays will be almost impossible to achieve due to the topography of the land. People attending the church park on the side of the road, reducing it to single file. There are also 2 bus stops just down from the proposed entrance used by school children, adding to the hazards. And finally, national planning policy says that permission should be refuted for sites that are not environmentally acceptable. Based on the above, I ask that the proposal is rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Nigel Thorpe.
Good afternoon, Chair and Councillors. My name is Nigel Thorpe. I'm a resident of Denby Dale. My principal issue is flooding and water within Denby Dale as a whole. It is a major, major problem. I was very interested in the flood risk assessment for this development, and I consider it to be flawed. It doesn't address the condition and the capacity of the current infrastructure. Yes, there is an attenuation tank on the site, but let's be clear, attenuation tanks don't stop flooding. They delay and potentially mitigate the impact, but generally only within the site, not the wider infrastructure at large. The Wakefield Road is in a really bad state of disrepair, and a function of that is inadequate drainage, badly maintained drainage, failed drainage. You just have to walk down there and you can see the crazing in the asphaltic layers, which is evidence of subgrade failure. Even in terms of moderate rainfall, you get rivers running down Leakhall Crescent, Leakhall Lane, and also Cumberworth Lane. And then they go on to Wakefield Road, back up the drainage on Wakefield Road, and then the drains or the gullies percolate more water onto the road surface. The most recent example of this was Tuesday evening. We had a flash storm. We had hail and we had rain. And I wouldn't say it was particularly heavy or particularly prolonged, but the effect on Wakefield Road there was 5 inches of water. Drivers couldn't delineate the footway from the road surface. That was totally flooded. The footways were a no-go zone for pedestrians. Time after time, walking my dogs, I get ambushed by tsunamis of water from passing traffic. And this is only going to exacerbate the problem on Wakefield Road. Allied to that is the increase in construction traffic on Wakefield Road. We've got evidence of failed ironwork there. Recently, we've had at least 2 manholes repaired because of the failing subgrade they've settled. And perhaps the most dangerous one was last Tuesday afternoon outside Denbydale Cricket Club, where, because of the deluge of water, a manhole blew. So there was a hole in the road and a part of a manhole cover obstructing the road surface. So this development is going to put more water into that system, and that is totally unacceptable. A proper flood risk assessment needs to be done, and because this is going to go past over the whole life cycle of the development, and that just hasn't been done, it's not been addressed properly, it's been given lift service, and that is one of the reasons why I would seek to have this planning permission refused.
Thank you. So next we've got Councillor Bamford. You've got up to 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, committee. The problems with this site, they're not going to be easily overcome. We've been here before, and we've had a refusal. For the start, the site entrance that was advised against at the local planning stage by the planning inspector it's a major safety issue. This road, you can't get two trucks past each other or two buses by the church. You've got a traffic survey that was conducted between 10:30 and 11 o'clock in the morning and 2:30 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's totally, it should be discounted. That's useless. If you go down there at 7:30 on a morning or 5 o'clock in the evening, you'll see the procession of traffic that goes past this site. You'll see the procession of traffic on the morning that's queuing for the M1 at Wakefield. It should just be discounted. So adding a junction to Cumberworth Lane can only make it less safe. The coal, here we go. The Coal Authority will grant a licence to extract incidental coal on development sites if this cannot be avoided through design or remediation techniques and it can be removed in a safe manner. I don't see any evidence that they've tried to design this out, and I don't think it can be removed in a safe manner. We've got 4,400 cubic metres of coal. This is not just a small amount of coal. It's not a small excavation, this. This is 4,400 metres of coal, nearly 6,000 tonne. If their sums are correct, but they don't know. No one knows what's in this site because no one's done a full site intrusive survey. So this could double. We don't know. So what do we do when we come to the point where who's going to mitigate? Turn around and say, look, we need to take more coal out. Who's going to say, no, you can't take any more coal out? They could just say that it needs to come out. So the other thing about this is the depth of the excavations at the side of the existing properties is going to endanger them. We don't know how many mine adits go underneath the existing properties. And when the fill goes back in, it'll be vibro compacted, so it's going to affect these foundations. It's going to affect the walls of the excavations, which could be up to 3 metres deep at the side of the ones at 277 and 275. The other thing is, we don't know, where is this coal going? Is it going to be used? Is it a commercial venture? Is it going to be sold? We've also got fire clay on site as well, which is another commercially viable material. We've heard them say that it may go off as waste. If it goes off as waste, it's going to be classed as hazardous, and that's a massive cost to get rid of. So I would suggest that it's not environmentally and it's not financially viable to do that. So I would say this coal probably would be sold, which would give an incentive to dig more out than you would normally. So given that, I'd say this is heading towards being an open cast coal mine again. So basically it's the same application, I think, that was refused at Heavy Woolen Planning Committee. It still poses an unacceptable environmental risk through deep excavation, mine workings, water contamination. I mean, when we grout, where's the water, the contaminated water that's in the workings, where's that going to go? Because it's obviously going to be replaced by grout, so where's that going to come out? What have we got in place to mitigate that? So I'd say in the interest of consistency of planning decisions and the health and safety of the residents of Denby Dale, I would ask the committee to refuse this application, please.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson, you're next. 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, colleagues, I'm speaking on behalf of myself and Councillor McKirker, who can't be here today due to not being able to get the time off work. The reality of this application is that it isn't simply a housing application. It's a Trojan horse for an open cast mine in the middle of our village, a proposal that's previously been rejected. I'm grateful for the committee's decision last time in granting my request for a deferral, giving the applicant an opportunity to set out further information on this so that it could be assessed and considered properly so that a legal considered decision could be made. So it's disappointing that this opportunity hasn't been taken and that you don't have proper assessments of what is intended, mineral extraction, in front of you. The only real additional information that we've received, which was requested for assessment from the last meeting, is that they expect to extract around 4,400 cubic metres, then grout and build a metre up. That's it on the mineral extraction. The applicants and officers say it could be far more mineral extraction, which we know means it almost definitely will be. As Councillor Denby said, on a rough projection, that's around 1,412 tonnes of coal. That's an emission of 3,671 tonnes of carbon dioxide from that mineral extraction. There's still no assessment of what impact significant mineral extraction will have on the environment, climate change, or our local area. I raised this issue last time. It's still not been answered properly. I think that's because the applicant doesn't want you to know the answer, because it would be unhelpful for the application, and will hope that delegated approval will mean that they can get through and start on, and by the time these issues come to light, it's too late to stop it. But this is now an even bigger problem for you as the committee in making this decision than when I raised it last time. Because this morning there was a Supreme Court ruling against Surrey County Council regarding a planning application which involves the extraction of fossil fuels. The Supreme Court found against the council because they didn't properly assess the downstream climate and environmental impact of the extraction and emissions which arose from the extraction of those fossil fuels. Part of the council's defence was that neither they nor the application itself related to the combustion of material extraction, so it didn't need to assess that or account for that within the application, the assessment or the decision. That defence was explicitly rejected by the Supreme Court and has overturned a planning law precedent that only impacts from extraction itself should be accounted for within a planning decision. The courts found and set an immediate precedent in planning law that where extraction of a fossil fuel is included in a planning application, that applicant and the council must assess the downstream emissions and impact of that extraction and include that within the consideration of the application. To fail to do so has been found to not be legal by the Supreme Court this morning. As I outlined in my deputation last time, that has been very explicitly omitted and not assessed. There's been no assessment of this here, none whatsoever, and the suggestion that a short condition that there should be a mitigation strategy covers all of this and that you need as a committee not look or consider that, in my view, isn't acceptable, and nor is it now legal in the view of the Supreme Court. So what you have in front of you is an application for an open cast mine in the middle of a village which at some point in a decade or so may have some houses on it, probably not, with no detailed assessment of how the mining will take place or the impact it will have on the local area or the climate impact of that mining. So not only would an acceptance of this application be a blatant breach of the environmental and climate policies, both within the council and the local plan, as I outlined last time, it wouldn't be legal under planning law as a result of the precedent set this morning. So if you have worries about the potential cost of a decision potentially being overturned if an appeal was successful at the government's planning inspectorate, you can be certain that this moderate hypothetical cost will pale into significance in comparison to the costs of an appeal being made that Surrey Council have just experienced. So I'm asking you to reject the application on the basis that the applicant hasn't provided sufficient information on their proposed mineral extraction and that the council and committee have been unable to assess the impact of it in line with your legal obligations, as well as the fact that on the basis of the information that has been provided, it isn't compliant with our council or local plan policies in relation to climate and the environment as set out in Councillor Denby's objection, LP 11, 20, 28, 30, 49, 53, 63, as well as those of other residents. Thank you, colleagues. Please reject.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to the agent, Mark Lane. You've got 3 minutes, Mark. Don't think so. If it's not, maybe try the one.
There you go. The light's up. Good. Thank you, Chair. My name is Mark Lane and I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant in support of the proposed development. Following the deferral of the application at the last planning committee, the applicant has provided further information to provide clarity and comfort to councillors so that they can determine the application with confidence. GRM, the applicant's geotechnical consultants who have supported the application to date and who are present via video link to answer any questions that you may have indicated that a total of 4,000 cubic metres of material, including coal, will be removed. This will not be a coal mining operation. It will be work simply to stabilise the land to allow house building. This will be a waste and will not be commercially extracted. This equates to about 10 HGV movements in and 10 HGV movements out per day. Approximately 1,650 tonnes of material will be imported to grout the site. Grouting will take approximately 2 months, which equates to about 2 vehicles in and 2 vehicles out per day. Grouting will be done via a large tracked rotary drill, which will drill the holes to the necessary depths before grouting material is pumped in. The applicant has agreed to the working hours conditions suggested by officers and also has agreed to the management plans which will be conditioned to secure the site specifics and detailed mitigation measures in relation to noise, dust, water runoff, methods of working and the routing of HGV movements, etc. It is standard practice for such plans to be conditioned at this stage. And the applicant has agreed to cap any exposed coal measures with that 1 metre layer of inert soils, which we've already discussed. The applicants have undertaken extensive ground investigations and remediation solutions have evolved from prolonged discussions with environmental health, industry experts and best practice advice from the Coal Authority. I think they've done a very thorough job in accordance with best practice. Grouting is commonly used and has indeed been used on neighbouring sites. It is not unusual for a site of this nature to be grouted. We therefore hope that these clarifications have been useful and have demonstrated to councillors that the proposed development can be implemented without detriment to residents or the environment. In summary, the site is allocated for housing development and therefore the principle of development is established as the council isn't unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. In addition to being unable to meet its housing delivery test, the tilted balance is engaged and planning permission should be granted unless adverse impacts outweigh the benefits. As demonstrated above and in the officer's report, there are no technical or environmental objections, including from highways and main drainage. Rather, the officer's report refers to a number of benefits, including housing, affordable homes, the provision of footpaths, etc.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. That's your 3 minutes.
Thank you.
So we've had all speakers. Before we go to members, can I just bring in our legal counsel, Matthew? He just wants to comment on the point was made about the recent court case, court decision.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. Just wanted to very briefly touch on the very specific point that your colleague raised in relation to the Supreme Court decision that was handed down this morning. I think it's fair to say that the summary that your colleague gave is a fairly decent summary. Surrey Council were found to have acted unlawfully. The reason they were found to have acted unlawfully is because they hadn't assessed the downstream impacts of carbon emissions as part of the environmental statement. The reason that case doesn't seem to directly apply to this application is because the planning officer and I had a discussion before the meeting, and I'm aware that the planning officer is confident that this is not EIA development, so there isn't an environmental statement, and those assessments wouldn't fall to be done, and it therefore falls outside the scope of the environmental impact assessment regulations. So hopefully that explains the position. It was that the challenge effectively was an attack on the material that the council used to make that determination, but the tool which was attacked is not required for the purposes of this application.
Thank you. before we, Victor, can you just confirm that? So the EIA is based on the scale, or what scale of the development is it, or why is it not applicable here?
There's a lot I could say on that, Chair, but firstly, this is my informal opinion on whether or not this development constitutes environmental impact assessment development. My view is that it won't. I've got a caveat though, and say that a full screening opinion has not been carried out for this development. That's the process that any local planning authority would go through to ascertain for definite whether or not a development is EIA. I'm thinking of other developments in the borough where EIA screening has been carried out, and they're bigger developments with, I think, much greater impacts than what would occur at this site. And in those sites, we've concluded that EIA doesn't apply. So I can't see that applying to this site either. Sites where the council has determined that EIA applies are usually typically much bigger sites with much more sensitive contexts. So I can't, in answer to your question as to what the criteria are for something qualifying for EIA, there's several different factors that a local planning authority would take into account when carrying out a EIA screening exercise. And it does relate to things like proximity of residents, proximity of the greenbelt, sensitive habitats, but also the scale of the development and how it will be carried out. But in summary, my view is that this would not be EIA development.
Okay, I'll open up to members for comments, questions. Councillor Armour.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Very interesting development, or proposal, I should say. And it does appear to me to be very clearly a two-phase proposal. It's got a housing proposal, we've got an extraction of carboniferous rocks proposal. We're in danger of concentrating too much on the coal at the moment, I think. I think concerns have been raised about the access egress and potential highway safety concerns with that. It appears that the now proposed access is not the one that was specifically included in the local plan when it was coming to fruition. I have concerns about that. Shouldn't overlook that. But it does seem that the major debate is about the coal. And really, what really concerns me is what guarantee would the council have that the developer, or if it was sold on the site is apparently for sale, if it was sold to an unscrupulous developer, what guarantee have they got? They wouldn't just take the coal, flog it and scarp her. We could end up with just a big hole in the ground, with nobody willing to come forward and pay to carry on the development. It seems rather dangerous to me, does that? And I'm saying nothing about the current developer, but it does appear the current developer may not always be the developer for this site. It would appear to have plans to dispose of the site with permission. So that's a big concern to me. And then I really have a query really from of the officer. On page 14 of the document pack, paragraph 415, it's quite a short paragraph, so it perhaps doesn't give enough detail, but it does seem to me to suggest that rather than excavate all the coal, all the carboniferous deposits, they could simply introduce a 1 metre cover of inert material to negate the fire risk there. So have I read that paragraph correctly? Could ask the officer through you.
Yeah, thank you. Do you want to answer that? And also, I know we're focusing obviously the reasons for deferral, but could you just cover off the point about the access point and the local plan, just so it's clear? Victor?
Through you, Chair. The point about one metre's depth of cover over combustible coal, as I said earlier, there's two ways of dealing with coal that's close to the surface: either dig it out or provide 1 metre of inert material above it. But that obviously, inconveniently, the coal isn't always where the developer wants it to be and doesn't correspond with the levels that the developer wants to provide to be able to develop this site. So, yeah, in some parts of the site, the developer will have the option of just covering the existing coal with 1 metre of inert material. In other places, to accommodate the development that's proposed without raising levels significantly, they would have to dig it out. Just on the site access issue, we did cover this at the last committee meeting in May, and I'll read out again the wording of the local plan inspector's report of the 30th of January 2019, specifically about this site. She said, at the hearing, that's the local plan hearing, the council indicated that access may be facilitated via Leak Hall Lane, and this should be clarified. No fundamental constraints related to heritage and other matters have been identified, subject to a modification that she'd recommended. The allocation is soundly based. And in the site allocation wording, this is for site allocation HS 144, one of the constraints is listed as the provision of a pedestrian footway is required across the site frontage at Leak Hall Lane. Now, I appreciate there's different interpretations of that wording, but as I mentioned at the last committee meeting, I don't see anything in that wording that either requires vehicular access to be provided from Leak Hall Lane. I also don't see anything that prohibits vehicular access being provided from Cumberworth Lane, which is to be expected. It's very rare for a local plan inspector to be that specific as to where a vehicular access to a site must be taken from, because any inspector, any planner should and are open to the possibility of an alternative proposal to the one being considered at the time being brought forward and being demonstrated to be safe and adequate, which is what's happened here. So in answer to the question, officer's view is no, Leak Hall Lane is not specified as the point where vehicular access must be taken from, either by the inspector or by the local plan.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have to start from the knowledge that this is an allocated housing site. Clearly questions have been raised about how it managed to get to be an allocated housing site, because a number of people have raised issues which kind of throw doubt on the process and on how it came to be agreed. I mean, most people will probably know that sites are put forward by landowners and then assessed by the planning authority as to whether they're suitable or not, and it goes through a whole range of processes. Clearly, this has passed a number of those tests, and I accept that some interpretation of the wording of the assessment of this can be taken to mean things that people wish it to mean, if you like, that the access should be somewhere else, for instance. I mean, I suppose if I was weighing up the two possible accesses, Cumberworth Lane might be more acceptable because it's a main road, whereas the other one is a cul-de-sac. I can see advantages in taking an access off Cumberworth Lane. For the moment, I'm just going to say, well, it's there in the application, and I will try to assess that along with other things. But there are one or two things about the, as Councillor Armour put it, the first phase of dealing with this site. In other words, dealing with minerals that are on the site and maybe need to be removed. A number of issues come to mind. There are voids under here. Do we know where they all are? I'm not sure we do. There's coal under the site. Do I know where all of that is? No, because I've not seen a map showing where the outcrop, or indeed where the coal is underground. In other words, a proper geological map showing how the seam disappears or not underground. And then I've issues about if you leave the coal where it is. Coal, as everybody knows, is an inflammable material, and underground or semi-underground fires have occurred in a number of places. I've read an article about one in Gateshead 4 years ago, which possibly was started by somebody having a fire on the surface. But be that as it may, there is still a hazard, which you would think on weighing it all up, either removing the coal or burying it to the extent that people can't get at it, has got to be done. And this is obviously an expense, undoubtedly, and adds to the cost of the development. Then one or two other things came up during the presentation, and issues raised by objectors. Noise from the grouting rig, and can that be accommodated? Can that be dealt with in relation to what are sometimes relatively close houses around the site? And then the other one is, if you start grouting in the way that as I understand it, is to be done, how does this interfere with the underground drainage? And where does the interfered with drainage actually go? The more we get into this, the worse it seems to get in many ways. It starts raising more questions. And at the risk of going on all afternoon, which those who know me know I'm quite capable of doing, I will leave those points which need to be made, and let other people have a go.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. If I may just start with a few observations. The first one would be, this first came to Heavy Woolen, I believe, in March 23, and with the number of objections and statements that have been made over that 16 months or so, I would have thought that a detailed EIA would have been actioned. So I'm quite surprised as far as the EIA is concerned. During that time, there's been a refusal and also a deferment on this. And what I fail to understand is, from a developer's point of view, is the additional cost implication to make this site right, with unsaleable coal and no limit to the grout that the developer may have to use. Is there a legitimate interest in this for development or other interests at hand? So that was another observation. The other observation was reference to, we've saved an oak tree, but it's okay to extract 1,400 to 1,600 tonne of coal and fill holes in the ground with grout. I find it quite, let me use a polite term and say surprising, that our priority is one single oak tree, but it seems okay to pass planning permission to extract thousands of tonnes of coal. So that's another observation that I've got there. Call me a cynic. I'm a cynic, yeah. So there's also quite a few words that disturb me as far as this planning. One is on the grouting, it's stated likely to change. The other is the cubic meterage of the coal, and the word used in the statements in the planning application is possibly more. The other word used a couple of times is maybe. Another word that struck me was extensive mineral extraction. Another one was high-risk development. So those are a few words that create concern with me personally. My other observations are that Heavy Woolen had refused this on 7 items. Reading through the items themselves and what we have seen as mitigation or conclusions to those 7 items don't seem definite enough to change our minds. The other is the disproportionate investigation, which seems wholly inadequate as far as I'm concerned as well. So all these statements, all these anomalies as far as the land's concerned, and also the seam itself, we're being told that we can dig so far and then put something over the top of it that's going to be okay. We have no idea. Nobody has any idea where that seam will go and how deep it will go. I mean, for goodness sake, we've got a seam in this country in Northampton that comes out of the other side in Bavaria in Germany. So we have no idea where this seam is going to go and how deep they're going to have to dig to make this plot safe. I find it quite surprising that we've even come to this point with a plot of land that seems so disturbingly unsafe as far as the existing residents that live in this area and the potential residents that would live on this plot without any more investigation as far as the EIA is concerned. So without a shadow of doubt, I would move to refuse this application on an environmental point of view, unsuitability and the potential risk of the existing residents and the potential residents that would live there. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Sokol.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, at the last meeting, we listened to the local community raising the issue about this application. Yeah. We listened to the officer, we discussed the application within our membership, and we deferred the application and come back with addressing those issues raised by the local community. Yeah. And the applicant has come back. He had addressed some of those issues raised by ourselves and the local resident who objected to the application. I expected at that time, applicant will address those points to the expectation as the local community and to the members and resolve the issue. Now, I have listened some new points raised by the regarding coal. What should be done to the coal? It should be removed, it should be sold, or what it should be done, yeah. And the highway issue again, yeah. Officer have said the highways authority are happy with the access of the highway of the road, but still, I don't know. this site is allocated for housing, yeah? If we refuse this application, applicant might go to the appeals, we might lose the appeal, it costs a lot of money to them, but I don't want to go against the local community, yeah? I think if we consider to defer this application again and try to raise further those issues with the applicant and come back in the next committee meeting. We done it before. I remember we done some application. We deferred it 2-3 times, not only once. Yeah, then we resolve it. So I'm not saying it should be refused. I'm not saying it should be approved. Yeah, I think we need to give some more chance to the applicant through our officer negotiate on further point raised by the local community.
Yeah. Councillor Anwar.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I want to start off by apologising I wasn't available this morning for the site visits. I had other meetings to attend. Looking at this certain application, I would like to second Councillor Mark Thompson. On the basis, all the ward councillors, majority of the residents that have come here today have voiced their concerns, and I do agree with majority of their concerns. I mean, if this was happening in my ward, I would pick the people 100 times over the applicant, because ultimately it's the community that should decide on what developments happen in their own areas. And I do understand their concerns, so for them reasons, I would like to second Mark Thompson's proposal.
Okay, 1 second. We'll come back to the reasons for refusal in a minute. Just a couple of things. Can I just say a couple of things from the chair? So, one would be, to all the members, we need to make the decision on the application before us based on planning reasons. I think that's really important, just to make sure everyone's clear on that. I think, firstly, this is a difficult application, but one thing I would say is I think we do need to make a decision on the application. I'm concerned about the discussion of, well, somebody might choose to do something else in the future. There might be another developer in the future. Those things are true, but I don't think within the context of this decision we can assume that, say there was another developer that took this, that they would, that somehow they would be sort of some sort of cowboy developer or something like that who wouldn't follow the planning permission. I feel that's not the appropriate way to look at it. The second thing is that you know, there's a little bit of a contradiction here in the sense that you can't evidence everything that's in the ground unless you extract everything from the ground. But the problem is that we don't want everything extracted from the ground. So there's a balance to be struck there, which I think we just need to be mindful of. Those are my only comments. So, Councillor Pinnock, you had your hand up again. Did you want to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just looking to see what reasons one could give for refusing. Councillor Anwar took the words out of my mouth, but that's not a problem. I do feel that there are sufficient grounds to refuse it. And looking at the reasons that were given by the Heavy Woolen Committee, the first and second ones, I think, no, Mr. Wordsworth shaking his head, but I'm looking for words that can express what we've said in terms of planning policy. There are, it seems to me, doubts about what the effect of doing either course of action in relation to the coal, either leaving it where it is and grouting it or taking it out. Neither, in some ways, neither of them seem acceptable. And, you know, the impartial observer might say to that, looking at it, well, it shouldn't be a housing site in the first place. In that case, I just leave that hanging there. I can't do much about that at the moment, because it is a designated housing site, and somehow or other we've got to make the best of it. But it does seem to me that certainly the extraction method will have unacceptable impact on people living around the site. All right, that'll go away after a while, and development would take place. But if you leave it where it is, how do we know that even if you grouted it and the ground stability appears to be good, you're then going to start putting houses on top of it? Fortunately, this country is not given to a lot of seismic activity, but it doesn't take much sometimes to disturb. Well, I mean, one of the things that one notices about geological maps of this area is the number of faults all over the place. Now, faults exist everywhere in geology, but those are known about because of all the mining activity that's taking place here, and mapping has been done on a large scale. So we know all about them. And that's probably not a very good planning reason for, but I wasn't proposing that. I was just looking at these two reasons that are here already.
Okay, so we've had it obviously moved and seconded for refusal, and obviously Councillor Pinnock, you made some comments on that. So I'll bring in the officer now, because I think we potentially need to, if that's the case, we need to get some clear reasoning.
Thank you, Chair. I understand, I can appreciate your comments. Thank you for your comments, members of the public as well, residents. I think one thing that I just want to refocus committee's minds on to the reasons that this application was deferred in the first place. I've heard some of your comments have been about the access and the highways, and I know you are picking up on concerns of residents. However, at the last planning committee, strategic planning committee, where this item was considered, you didn't defer it on highway matters. You didn't defer it on matters that were considered at heavy woolen committee on the previous application. You considered it for the reasons in paragraph 1.3, which is about the amount of the material, about the environmental impacts, about how the operations would be carried out. And I did want you to refocus on that in your considerations. And when you do go to vote on the decision, I would say that you must focus on those matters rather than the other matters, and some of the matters that we have heard from residents as well.
Thanks. I mean,
also, Chair, if I may say, you haven't heard from the technical officers in terms of the excavation who have come here today from Environmental Protection. I would advise the committee, before making a decision, to at least have the opportunity to advise them why we consider that the application is considered acceptable in terms of environmental and land contamination, etc., etc.
Yeah, okay, I think it would be good to hear. Who would like to comment on those points? Yeah.
Through you, Chair, Natalie Heaney, Kirklees Council Environmental Health. I've listened to what members and the public have had to say today, but in terms of if there's been adequate site investigation from a land contamination aspect, we feel that there has been. In Victor's slides, there was a site plan showing the boreholes, the trial pits that have been undertaken. There was samples retrieved from that, and there was no land contamination issues in terms of inorganics or organic pollutants found on site. There's been detailed ground gas investigation on site, 6 visits over 3 months, which is standard. If at any point during that investigation there's elevated ground gases, they have to continue with gas monitoring, and nothing was found elevated or significantly high risk in terms of a mine site. To give you an idea in terms of numbers and what that means, so if anything over 1% is found for methane, that would be a trigger value. Over them 6 visits over 3 months, the methane was at 0.1%. The carbon dioxide was 8.2 as a peak. Anything over 5% is a trigger value. But then what they can do is they can calculate the gas screening value, and that was undertaken by the consultant, and nothing was found to be in excess of the CS2 site, so nothing that can't be mitigated against using gas protection. We are of the opinion that the site is suitable and safer development, and that's why we recommend a conditions for a remediation strategy. As part of that remediation strategy as well, we've asked for additional monitoring to take place following remediation, so the drilling and grouting works, to ensure that any changes to the ground gas regime would be picked up at that point, and then there could be revisions made for any gas protection measures that need to be put into place into the properties to mitigate any gas ingress that may occur. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Right, so does anybody else have any other comments? Any other members? No, okay. So I think, just give bear us 1 second, we're just having a discussion about the legal requirements on the potential reasons for refusal, so just give us 1 second. So do we need to just, so we've had a mover and seconder for refusal, so do we just need to flesh out the reasons for refusal? Councillor Thompson, you moved refusal. I don't know if you'd just set out specifically the planning reasons for refusal, just so we can record that properly.
Yeah, my statement on refusal was under the under environmental, also that the site be unsuitable for development, and also potential risk to existing residents and future residents that would be on the site. So there was a list of 3 things.
Okay, does anybody else have anything to add to those reasons? No.
Thank you, Chair. We would have to add planning policies to those and elaborate on those comments to ensure it's it can stand up as a reason for refusal. But if that's what members want, then we will do our best.
Oh. So, yeah, so sorry for the delay. So we're just going to take a 5-minute adjournment just so that we can, officers can write up basically the reasons for refusal, just so we've got a clear rationale for the refusal before the members vote on that. Okay, so we're back in 5 minutes. Hi everybody, thanks for being patient. So just to summarise the situation, so what we're just trying to do is to make sure that based on the reasons that have been discussed, that we have a clear rationale for the reasons for potentially refusing the application, because what we don't want is to be challenged, those reasons not to be clear and those to be challenged. So we want to make sure that if the committee is going to vote on refusal, that those are clearly fleshed out. So we've provided some high level. What we need to do, committee, is go through the points that's been raised and flesh out that a little bit in terms of making sure we're really clear on the reasons why that's been proposed by the members that proposed it. So Victor, are you okay to just do that at a high level and we can add some colour into it?
Thank you, Chair, through you. So members, just as a reminder, when the council refuses planning permission for a development, the way we formulate those refusal reasons usually include three elements. We usually use wording along the lines of the development due to, and then we insert the aspect of the development of concern, would cause, and then we insert the problem that's been identified, and this is contrary to policies, and then we insert the policy references. So that's how we formulate the reasons for refusal usually. So based on that, and bear with me members, this is a little bit rushed, what we've gathered from the discussion earlier on regarding environmental impacts and impacts on residents and the suitability of the site or unsuitability of the site for this development, the wording that we've drafted so far, subject to change, is the proposed development, due to its scale, location, proximity to residents, associated remediation and mineral extraction, and due to unknown conditions beneath the site, would cause environmental impacts. And on that point, members, the environmental impacts, I think we do need a steer from you as to what you are most concerned about there. And the development has not been demonstrated, it has not been demonstrated that this site is suitable for the proposed development. The proposals are therefore contrary to policies, and then would fill in the policy references. LP 24, 36, 52 and 53, I think, would be referenced there, as well as reference to the National Planning Policy Framework. So it would be along those lines, but members, we would need a steer on the environmental impacts aspect or element of that refusal reason, so we can pin down exactly what the problems, what the concerns are, so we can then defend them robustly at appeal, should an appeal be submitted.
Okay. Any members who supported refusal would like to add to that? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. So on the first point that was made, I think it was on the remediation strategy, which you did mention LP 53. And also you did mention the National Planning Policy Framework, which would be paragraph 183. Yeah. So the evidence as far as the environmental policies, I think you did mention LP 11, LP 20, 28, 30, 49 and 63 of the local Kirklees local plan. In my humble opinion, and not as a professional like yourselves, I'm deeming that would be enough to put the refusal forward as far as those notes are concerned. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, anybody else, anything to add on that point? Councillor Pinnett.
I mean, I think the difficulty we've got here is that some of these impacts are not known, not specifically. I mean, the topic of groundwater interference has been mentioned, but I mean, to my way of thinking, any interference with groundwater is a bad thing, even if it turns out to be not a gross change, but it's change that isn't there at the moment, is the point I would make about that. And also the fact that, I mean, it comes back to some extent to the discussion you had about the EIA, that yes, it might be a small area, but it's got houses round at least 3 sides of it. So there is an impact on a group of people who are already there. What its impact on future residents is I mean, if the site's okay, then there will be future residents. I'm not absolutely sure whether we're saying that it's so unsuitable that there shouldn't be any. I mean, all right, we might be refusing this application, but that's not to say that a future application might not get round some of those issues. But you know, that's what we're talking about at the moment, the current application and its consequences. I can't think of anything else along those lines.
Victor, did any of that help or not?
To an extent, the reason for refusal absolutely needs to identify the harm and the impact that is of concern. We'd struggle to defend a reason for refusal, and it's not good form. The government doesn't advise us to do this, to just draft reasons for refusal that simply state the development is contrary to this policy. We need to say, if we do have a concern regarding the number of HGV movements, for example, we need to say that would result in air quality impacts that are deemed unacceptable, or noise impacts that are deemed acceptable, or if we've got a concern about the noise generated by the grouting process, that needs to be specified in the reason for refusal. I mean, we could leave it as noise impacts. We don't necessarily need to say caused by the grouting machinery, for example. If the environmental impact is to do with climate change, the reason for refusal should say that. It does need to specify the harm or the impact so that officers going into an appeal know what needs to be defended in an appeal hearing or inquiry, and obviously it's needed so the applicant or appellant, should they appeal, know what the grounds for refusal specifically are. So yeah, any of those impacts or harms, we do need a steer on as to which of those members want including.
Did you have your hand up again or not? Were you indicating to speak? Okay. So, Councillor Anwar?
I think coming back to why it should be refused and on what grounds the committee are deciding, I mean, on the 16th of May, it was deferred in paragraph 1.3. And the main 2 concerns I particularly have, and I think the residents too, and the councillors, is how much material would be removed from the site and how much material would then be imported into the site. And as we've discovered, it is coal that will be removed. Do you have an exact figure of how many tons or kilos or even a bag for barbecue will be removed from there? We don't know. So it's on assumptions again. So I think it's a difficult one, but I still stand by it. And I spoke Councillor Mark Thompson in his comments, and Andrews as well, so it's a difficult one.
Councillor Pinnock, quickly, yeah.
Yes, Mr. Grayson very helpfully said 550 loads, and I've got a note here which I can't read. I don't know whether it's that's the loads of removed material. Or is that the number of loads of removed material and the grout coming onto the site? Is that all added together? Well, but that's a lot, because there's 1,650 tonnes of grout being imported into the site. So the number of HGV movements over what I've got down here is 8 weeks. Would cause quite a lot of nuisance to local residents, it seems to me.
Okay, so if I can summarise then, I think the reasons that are being given is the environmental impact of the removal of coal from the ground, and the fact that it can't be quantified how much coal would be removed and how that would then be onwardly used, how that would onwardly use, and the impact that would have on the environmental impact that have, plus the HGV usage and the impact that will have on the local environment. I think those are the reasons. Is that your understanding, Victor? Is there anything else? Councillor Thompson?
Chair, if you don't mind, and apologies for the flippant comment earlier, but what I suppose my frustration was, and correct me if I'm wrong, we as the committee don't have the expertise and the depth of knowledge as far as fleshing this out to its nth degree to make it a true and proper refusal and the objections list to go with it. I guess my question is there not enough evidence around what I'm trying to and being supported on the refusals, which is the environmental unsuitability, etc. Is there not enough information around the LPs, etc., to be able to flesh that out and for officers to be able to do those objections?
So just to sum up, so where we are, we've got two options now, basically. So based on the discussion we've had, we can vote on your proposal to refuse the application based on the very high level discussion we've had and the points raised. The other alternative that we do have is to defer the application, and in that context we could ask the officers to go away to flesh out the points in more detail. I think what we can't do is refuse it on non-specific grounds, because we can't then add reasons for refusal after the refusal has been taken, because the officer would be assuming what the committee had meant by that. So we'd have to have something in front. So if you would like to withdraw your move to refuse and move to defer, that is an option that we have as well. Those are the two options that we have at the moment. So you want us to vote based on the reasons that you've set forward, and Councillor Anwar, you're seconding that. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just in summary from an officer's perspective then, we don't think that the evidence is there for the reasons for refusal. However, as a committee decision, we will do our best if it goes to an appeal and defend that reason for refusal if committee do refuse the application. But I just need to make you aware that we don't think that the evidence is there from our technical consultees and through the processes that we've gone. It might be worthwhile refusing on lack of information, but we will obviously consider that when we're fully writing the reasons for refusal out.
Okay. So just on that basis then, albeit of what you've said, do you have it written down what the reasons that have been provided for, and is that sufficient for now to move to the vote on that?
I'm sorry, not really. Again, we do need to be very specific about the harm. Is it the number of vehicle movements associated with the works? Literally, we just need a list.
Yeah, vehicle movements is, I think, one. Right. One is the amount of coal extracted and the use of that coal.
But the harm resulting from that needs to be specified in the reason for refusal.
The carbon emissions, air quality, yeah. Yeah. Councillor Minnick, yep.
Notwithstanding the EIA comments, there is still the issue of if you take the coal off the site you've got to dispose of it as hazardous waste. So that is an issue, even if it is in quantity not sufficient for EIA rules. You know, you've still got to dispose of a hazardous waste.
Sorry, members, I do have to remind the committee that this application is for a residential development that involves the removal of material from the site. What happens to that material is not material planning consideration.
So, look, where we're at is we've had the reasons for refusal. If members are not comfortable as set out, then they don't have to refuse the application and we can defer it after such a vote. Okay, so I think we're going to have to vote based on the reasons that have been put forward. I think we've discussed it sufficiently, and we've not come up with any additional reasoning. So we have to at some point make a decision.
Okay, what I've typed out so far is the proposed development, due to its scale, location, proximity to residents, and due to its associated remediation, would cause an unacceptable number of vehicle movements and environmental impacts associated with the removal of coal from the site. In addition, due to unknown conditions beneath the site, there is a lack of information that prevents, I'm off the top of my head here, that prevents it being ascertained what the environmental impacts of the development would be. And also, in addition, it has not been demonstrated that the site is suitable for residential development. The proposed development is therefore contrary to policies, and then there would be a list at the end of the condition. Reason for refusal.
Thank you.
So the displacement of contaminated water that's already on the site by using the grout, and also the redirection of natural water flow underground that could cause a problem reference to using the grout, which is an unknown quantity. Another curious thing is that it appears that we've got to be so specific on this, but the developer doesn't seem to need to be specific about the amount of coal that is extracting and also the amount of grout that is being using. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so we've had move in a second for refusal and the reasons set out. So we'll go to the committee members to vote on that.
Yeah, so you're voting for refusal on the basis as read out by Victor. Councillor Sokol?
Abstain.
Councillor Anwar?
For.
Councillor Pinnock?
Sorry, I've changed my mind. Against.
Against. Councillor Thompson?
For.
Councillor Armour?
For.
Councillor Homewood?
Against.
That's carried, Chair. 3 votes for the motion.
Okay, thank you. The application's refused. Thank you, everyone. We'll carry on now. Sorry, it took a while, but to that. So we'll carry straight on with time in mind. So the next item is item 12. This is the planning application of Lindle Moore Road. Nick.
Thank you, Chair. Good day, members. My name is Nick Hurst, case officer for this application. This is a hybrid application seeking full permission for a single commercial B2, B8 unit, as well as the site's access road, with outline permission, with all matters reserved, for a commercial development of EB, B2 and B8 uses across several units. EB use class would be a restaurant, B2 is general industry, and B8 is warehousing. The outline application has all matters reserved, namely layout, scale, appearance, landscaping and access. These aspects of the application would be, or the application subject to the outline element, would be subject to separate reserved matters applications at a later date. The application is presented to committee due to the level of public objection received. The site is on Lindle Moor, 3.5 kilometres northwest of Huddersfield Town Centre and is located to the west of Ainley Top roundabout, just south of the M62. The site covers an area of 6.3 hectares of greenfield land. It has a varied topography but overall falls in an easterly direction. The yellow circles denote 2 pylons on the site. These connect to the blue circled pylon to the north of the site. As such, high tension cables cut across 2 parts of the site. Looking outside of the site boundary, it is bordered by nut roads to the north, east and west. Dwellings are located to the east and south, with commercial units further to the west. To the north is open land, which then leads on to the M62. The site is part of the local plan mixed-use allocation MXS3, as shown by the red area. The mixed-use allocation is for commercial and residential uses. This application site, identified in blue, is the last parcel to be built out. It comprises approximately 20% of the total allocation. Housing has been delivered in the green area, while other commercial units have been erected in the yellow. So just a few images of the site now to add context. This image is taken looking into the site from the Weatherhill Road and Lindle Moore Junction. This image is from Crossland Road towards the dwellings to the southwest of the site. And this image is from Weatherhill Road, showing the relationship between the site and properties on Alderstone Rise. And finally, these are images of the nearby commercial units erected as part of the rest of the allocation. This image shows the 2 components of the proposal. The land in green is subject to the full plan commission. This includes the erection of Unit P, which is just being highlighted there, in the southeast corner of the site. Unit P would have a floor area of 4,802 square metres with associated landscaping and external works as per the area in green. The access works and the internal road are also part of the full permission. The outline permission covers the pale orange. The layout and scale of the units within the area are indicative and therefore subject to change. The indicative plan has been submitted to demonstrate how the site could be developed. This image indicatively shows 12,049 square metres of floor space. So returning to Unit P, the subject of the full permission, this image shows the proposed elevations. While it is accepted that the development, both Unit P and the rest of the outline element, would alter the character of the site, as it is currently a greenfield site, officers consider it to have a typical modern commercial building appearance, like units built elsewhere on Lindle Moore Road, and would set an appropriate character for the other units that would come forward as part of the outline. Unit P would be adjacent to various properties on Alderstone Rise to the southeast of the site. Officers have given careful consideration of impacts on neighbouring properties to this street. While it's acknowledged the proposed development would be clearly visible from several properties on Alderstone Rise, there is no right to review in planning, and being visible will not in itself cause material harm. Due regard has to be given to material considerations such as overbearing and overshadowing, as is detailed within the report. By virtue of Unit P incorporating a staggered height design, the buffer zone and the separation distances, officers satisfied that the material harm would not be caused to those properties. Through you, Chair, I will now invite Highways Officer Ryan Kinder in to comment on the highway matters.
Through you, Chair.
To summarise the highway section of the report, the development as a whole is expected to generate 204 and 245 vehicular movements in the AM and PM peak periods respectively. Of this, approximately 10% is expected to be HGV movements, so in the region of 20 to 25 in the AM and PM peak periods. The site access internal layout is to be designed to adoptable standards. Moving on to offsite highway improvements, the existing signalised junction at Crossham Road has been assessed for capacity by the Council's UTC team. They have advised that an additional pedestrian phase can be incorporated into the signal timing to enable pedestrians to access the site safely, and this is to be conditioned accordingly. With regards to the development in terms of the impact on Ainley Top roundabout, of the forecast traffic generation, it is anticipated that 65 to 85 vehicles in the AM and peak periods will land at Ainley Top roundabout. Given this, development is not going to have a severe effect on the operation of the existing roundabout. However, a Section 106 contribution of £24,000 has been secured to monitor the roundabout post-completion of the development, with a view to altering the signal timing subject to agreement from the National Highways team. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ryan. The report before members outlines Officer's full assessment of the proposal. In summary, the proposal seeks a commercial development on land that is allocated as a mixed-use allocation, with a local plan establishing those intended uses as commercial and residential. The residential aspirations of the allocation have been achieved, and the use of the site for commercial development is therefore considered appropriate. The proposal does include a main town centre use, the restaurant, which is outside of a main town centre use. However, the sequential approach has been applied to the location of this restaurant, as well as a retail impact assessment, and conclude it to be acceptable. Therefore, the principle of the development is found to be acceptable and would represent an effective and efficient operation of a local plan allocation. Regarding the design, the appearance of Unit P and the associated works, including its landscaping, are considered acceptable and would not harm the character and setting of the area. The remainder of the development is made at outline submission, and limited details are held at this time. However, officers are satisfied there are no fundamental issues why appropriate designs may not come forward at reserve matters stage. Likewise, officers are satisfied that proposal will not materially prejudice the amenity of nearby residents, and, as set out by the Highways Officer, would not prejudice the safe and effective use of the highway network. Planning contributions totalling £24,200 would be put forward to supporting sustainable travel at the site, and as noted by Ryan, a further £24,000 to monitor traffic and potential traffic light alterations at Ainley Top. Due regard has been given to other material planning considerations, including drainage, contamination, air quality and ecology, and found to be acceptable as per the report. This includes a further contribution of £9,200 towards securing ecological net gain. 36 representations were received within the representation period. However, these are considered and found and addressed within the report. Officers are therefore recommending approval of the application, subject to securing the 106 agreement and the conditions as set out within the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we have the agent, David Story, to speak.
Thank you, Chair, members. My name's David Story. I'm a Chartered Town Planner acting on behalf of the applicant. You've had before you a well-written and detailed officer report that sets out the proposals, planning policy, consultation responses and reactions to those responses. Just by way of background, I've been involved in this site since around 2010. And in the planning history, we secured in 2013 planning permission for employment use on the site. And Councillor Sokol and Pinnock will remember that at that time the UDP allocated the whole of Lindle Moore for employment purposes. But for a variety of reasons, the market didn't come forward in that respect, and it was somewhat diluted by housing applications. That was rectified when you adopted your 2019 local plan, which then identified it as a mixed-use site. And as Nick Hurst said in his presentation, this is the last remaining element of that allocation. We presented a pre-application inquiry to this committee back in February 2021, and that was well received by members, and then we went away and submitted an application in May 2022. We're 2 years on from there, and the application itself has been somewhat delayed by necessary highway interrogation, including national highways as well. We've worked collaboratively with officers in that respect, and you'll see in the report that amendments have been made to the scheme in terms of design of the industrial unit. The reason why it's hybrid is that at the time when we submitted it, we had an end user for that full application element. Unfortunately, because of the passage of time, that end user has now gone elsewhere. But nevertheless, the details are there and important and can be used by other users. What you have before you is an application that's compliant with policy, and you're all fully aware that you get told at every planning committee that planning law requires applications to be determined in accordance with the development plan unless there are material considerations to indicate otherwise. In this case, there are no material considerations that would indicate otherwise. It's fully compliant, and you have a report which shows that all consultees are actually supporting the application. They have no objections, in some cases subject to conditions. So I don't want to overegg it, Chairman, but I wholly recommend or endorse the recommendation to members. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, over to members. Any comments on this? Councillor Anwar.
Sorry, Chair. I'm all for buildings and storage units across the borough like this that create potential jobs for local people. One concern I have in point 3.1 is it states storage or distribution. So I just wanted some clarity whether it will remain as a storage unit or they will later on at some point convert it to distribution or vice versa. So could I have some clarity on that, please? Thank you.
Nick.
Through you, Chair. Use class B8 is storage and distribution. They go hand in hand, so you wouldn't need permission to swap between the two. To be clear, at the moment, the submission is for B8, so it could be storage, could be distribution, could be a split. So both are on the table at the moment. It's not one or the other. Thank you.
Councillor Anwar.
Just to counter that question, so have you taken into the consideration whether when it's used as storage or distribution, the amount of vehicles, including HGVs, sprinter vans and etc. into account coming and going from the area?
Through you, Chair. Yes, traffic volumes are used using something known as TRIX, the national database for vehicle movements, which is singular for the B8. So that is all B8s have the same unit. I will invite Highways in if they want to elaborate on that at any point.
Yep.
Through you, Chair. As Nick mentioned, we use what's called the TRIX database, which assesses comparable sites. So a number of existing sites up and down the country, including pastoral distributions, are taken into account, and those figures are added into the vehicle movements, which I elaborated on earlier on. So the answer to the question is yes, it has.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. A question rolling on from distribution. There's been a couple of major issues in our particular ward reference to allowing permission to go through on last mile distribution units. Is there any way that we can put a condition in this planning that doesn't allow last mile, because that always causes problems, especially in a small village like this?
Through you, Chair. That is something we have done in the past at the request of the committee, so yes, we can do that if that is considered a concern.
Thanks, Chair. I think perhaps if that is a requirement of the committee, could we ask for a comment from the applicant on that as to whether they can make it work or not? But I think that would be useful to enable the committee to make a decision on that additional condition. Thank you.
On the agenda.
Sorry, Chair, can I ask for clarification exactly what the council is asking for?
Can you clarify that, Councillor Thompson?
Of course, yeah. Thank you, Chair. What I'm asking for is if we accept planning with a condition, and the condition is that that you or whoever the landlord is of the property doesn't allow last mile distribution to operate from those units.
So this is regarding like DPD or those sort of people, the small deliveries. a question I would look to the council solicitor in that respect, in terms of the validity of that, from a legal point of view.
Yeah. Legal, do you want to comment on?
So we're talking about, I suppose, there are 7 criteria that need to be applied in order to allow a planning condition to be deemed lawful. You'll have to forgive me, I've not come across this terminology that's being used this afternoon before. I worry that one of the tests is a test of precision, and I don't know, based on what I've heard this afternoon, how one would come up with a form of wording that achieves what councillors want it to achieve, whilst also achieving that aim of being precise.
Councillor Bennett.
I can quote almost chapter and verse on this issue, which Mr Hurst will know fairly well, in relation to the North Byley site, where one of the applications on that site which said no last mile delivery, in other words parcel delivery, because it tends to increase the number of vehicle movements, and that was a sensitive issue on that site. I don't know whether it would be a sensitive issue on this site particularly, but it was certainly allowed in that case because of the access, the ultimate access to that site was constrained, and committee was conscious of the fact that they didn't want to cause more than was absolutely necessary in terms of vehicle movements, because normally the way it's worked out, the number of vehicle movements for B2 tends to be higher than B8, but where the B8 is parcel delivery, that isn't necessarily true. I can see where Councillor Thompson's coming from. Not sure I agree because I don't know whether the constraints are exactly the same as the case I am familiar with in my own ward, but that's by way of explanation, if you like.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that condition would be required in this context. I don't know if the planning officer has a view on whether that's considered or even relevant in this case.
Just to add a little bit of context, North Byley was a bit of a different beast. It was substantially, significantly larger in terms of floor space than what we've got here. What we have is a lot more smaller units, albeit indicatively shown at the moment. Anecdotally, last minute distribution tends to be your big units. You don't tend to put them in smaller ones, so we wouldn't be as concerned in this case, whereas North Byley, it was one big unit which did have that potential, although at the time it was said to be still quite small for a last mile distribution unit. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments on this application?
So, Chair, is that a no, then we couldn't put a condition in reference to last mile delivery, because from history it nearly always causes a problem, and I'm just thinking of the village itself. You start putting a last mile in there, whether it's a smaller unit or not, it is going to cause a challenge, and I don't think it's that much to ask reference to the...
I think my understanding is the message is we can put that condition in, you've requested it, but I don't know the members of the committee have suggested that they want to add that condition, so... Highways?
Through you, Chair. Just to clarify on the traffic generation, as part of the TRICS assessment for the B2 comparable sites, the assessment was carried out on a DPD and a parcel force site, which is comparable to this, so it's considered that these are taken into account on the figures that are input on the peak hours. In addition, Lindle Moore Road it's classed as quite a major distributor, bearing in mind it's in between Outland and Lindle Moore roundabouts. So we feel it can take that level of additional traffic, given the assessment that's being carried out. And it's not in the sort of predominant village centre of Lindley, it's more on the outskirts, in the vicinity of other commercial developments. So we'd feel that it wouldn't be necessary. Chair.
Okay, makes sense. So does any further comments on this, Councillor Sokol?
Well, Chair, I think it's a very good scheme, and it's been going on for some time. It creates some jobs, it creates some of those storage unit or distribution where the local business people need that. So on this point, I would like to move the officer recommendation to approve application.
We can go to the vote on that then.
So you're voting on approval subject to the conditions set out in the report, a Section 106 agreement as set out in the report. Councillor Sokol?
Sorry, for.
Councillor Anwar?
For.
Councillor Pinnock?
For.
Councillor Thompson?
For.
Councillor Armour?
For.
Councillor Homewood?
For.
That's carried unanimous, Chair.
Thanks. Okay, the next application is the Windy Ridge Quarry. In Firth, Hosanna.
Thank you, Chair. The application is brought to committee in accordance with the delegation agreement as a significant number of representations are received, 64 in total, including 3 in the committee report, the concerns of which are summarised under Section 7 of the report. Members should also note this is an identical scheme that was refused in March last year by Strategic Committee on 4 reasons for refusal, which I will refer to further in the presentation. The application relates to an operational quarry known as Windy Ridge at Cartworth Moor, Home Firth. This slide shows the application red line, which incorporates Windy Ridge Quarry to the north. Here, you can see the operational quarry. A former landfilled area within it, outlined in blue here. A previously restored part of a landfill quarry to the west here. Approximately 1.75 hectares of agricultural land here to the south. And a strip of land extending to Lindle Moore Road here to accommodate the new proposed access road. The current quarry is served from the access track to the north here, which is also a formal bridle way, and connects to Whitegate Road to the west here and to Lindle Moore Road to the east here. Lindle Moore Road is an adopted road and in part unsealed from near the junction of Weather Hill Lane to Whitegate Road to the south. A section of Lindle Moore Road from the junction of Copthurst Road to where it meets Whitegate Road to the south also forms part of a core walking and cycling route. There is a distance of approximately 60 metres from the independent dwelling here to the nearest part of the proposed extension to the quarry here. Full details of the proposals are set out in the report. In summary, permission is sought to deepen the existing quarry by a further 10 metres to an overall depth of 26 metres, to extend the quarry to the southwest to a depth of 26 metres, to close the existing access to quarry traffic following the completion of the proposed new access onto Lindle Moore Road along here, to increase the number of HGV movements per day from 16 to 30, 15 in, 15 out, placement of 3-metre high bunds along the southern and eastern perimeter of the proposed extension part of the site here, to locate a site cabin near the access point here, close to the new proposed road, to create 2 passing places on Cartworth Moore Road past the junction with Copthurst Road, and to recycle the imported construction, demolition and excavation wastes through the use of a crushing, screening, processing plant on site, and to restore the site by infilling, including imported construction, demolition and excavation wastes. Permission is also sought retrospectively for the excavation of the former landfill, which I referred to earlier, and storing temporarily on part of the previously restored quarry area material in 4-metre high mounds that could not be recycled from the previous landfill area. The mound was proposed to be grassed in the winter of 2022-23, as yet it has not been grassed or seeded. Extraction of the stone reserve is expected to take approximately 10 years, with backfill completed within an additional 10 years. Final restoration is proposed to be achieved by 31st of December 2043. This aerial photo shows the areas of the previous landfill prior to being excavated here, and the area of the previously restored quarry where the remaining fines from the former landfill after processing are now stockpiled along here. These sections indicate the depth of the proposed extractive operations, the depth of the current permission and the former landfill areas. Just to give members an idea, the section EF, that's the top section, taken from the east to west within the existing operational quarry. You can see the black hatched line here indicates the previously approved depth of the mineral extraction. It also includes the depth of the former landfill, the dark pink here, which has now been excavated. It also includes the depth of the now proposed, that's the bottom line, to 26 metres. This is an elevation drawing of the site cabin to be located at the end of the new access road within the quarry. This plan shows the maximum depth through the application site, throughout the application site, and the top of the excavation area indicated by the solid pink line on the edge here, which shows the stand-up distance from the edge of the site. The location of the wheel bath is also shown on this plan here, adjacent to the proposed cabin. This plan shows the location of the proposed 2 passing places on the unsealed part of Cartworth Moore Road, past the junction of Copthurst Road here, along with the remediation work proposed to Cartworth Moore Road. This plan gives an indication of how the mineral extraction will proceed into the extension area, with restoration and backfilling progressing into the northern part of the existing quarry within the first phase, years 1 to 5 of the proposals. This plan shows phase 2 works to be carried out in years 5 to 10. From this, it can be established how restoration, backfilling and mineral extraction will continue within the site. Phase 3 of the proposals show the extent of restoration to be achieved by years 10 to 15, with the remaining backfill and working areas predominantly to the south. The final phase to be carried out between years 15 to 20 show the restoration of the whole of the site on this plan, which demonstrates the proposed restoration land levels to bring the site back to agricultural fields. Whilst acceptable in terms of levels and features such as dry stone walls indicated on this plan, it lacks biodiversity enhancement. These are a couple of photos looking into the existing working quarry and one from the proposed extension area. The last photo shows an area of Cartworth Moore Road taken back in 2022. First slide. The existing operational quarry area is largely a mineral extraction area and a waste safeguarded area on the local plan. The site lies in an area of green belt. The mineral source from this site is high quality masonry stone for which there is a recognised high demand. If I can now refer members to the previous reasons for refusal set out in full in paragraph 3.3 of the report. The first of which related to lack of very special circumstances to outweigh the harm to the green belt. To support the recognised demand for the type of stone from this quarry, the applicant has provided 4 separate independent letters from businesses, companies who obtain this mineral from the application site to meet the demands of their business needs. The independent companies also recognise that whilst there is a continuing need for this type of mineral, they claim there is currently a shortage of masonry stone, particularly of the type available at the application site, which is needed to renovate heritage assets and for new building conservation areas. The evidence submitted substantiates that there is currently an unmet need for the demand and supply of this mineral, particularly for the repair of heritage assets. On this basis, it is considered that very special circumstances have sufficiently been demonstrated, which outweighs the inappropriateness and other recognised harm in the Greenbelt, in accordance with guidance in the MPPF and Local Plan Policy LP36, also addressing the previous first reason for refusal. Turning to the second reason for refusal in relation to highway safety from the proposed intensified HGV movements and the potential deterioration of the associated highway infrastructure likely to be impacted by the proposals. In contrast to the refused application last year, the proposals now include highway improvements, which will include surfacing work on Kirklees Moore Road at the cost of the applicant, followed by 6 monthly inspections to be carried out jointly by a representative of the council and the site operator, and any defects observed, these will be rectified at the cost of the applicant, and an annual highway maintenance fee of £50,000 to be split between Kirklees and Barnsley. These matters are to be secured through a Section 106 legal agreement. Subject to this and other suggested conditions by highway officers, the proposals are considered could be accommodated without causing significant highway safety concerns in accordance with local plan policies 21, 23 and LP36, and addresses the second reason for refusal. Going on to the third reason for refusal related to the potential noise concerns to the nearest noise-sensitive property known as Moorfield House that I pointed out earlier. The current application is accompanied with a revised noise impact assessment. On considering this, the Environmental Health Team has satisfied, subject to conditions, that the amenities of residents of Moorfield House would not be unduly compromised, thereby addressing the third reason for refusal. Turning to the fourth reason for refusal, this related to the potential impact on existing private water supplies serving a number of properties in the vicinity of the site. Whilst this is regulated by another section of environmental health under different legislation to planning, any impact on the environment, including groundwater resources, are still material considerations. To address this, an updated hydrogeological risk assessment is received with the application. The findings of this report are detailed in paragraph 10.70 to 1080 of the agenda. Subject to the development being carried out in accordance with the mitigation, management and monitoring measures set out in the hydrogeological risk assessment. I'll just refer to it as HRA. The HRA concludes the proposals could be undertaken without adverse risk on local water resources. This matter can be dealt with conditions and addresses the fourth reason for refusal. To conclude, the officer's recommendation is to delegate approval of the application and the issuing of the decision notice to the Head of Planning and Development in order to complete the list of conditions, including those contained in this report and the committee update, and to secure for the highway works Section 106 legal agreement that includes all the highway works outside the application red line. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we've got Chris Ballum, the agent. You've got 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. This is a small quarry which already has permission to dig deeper and to be restored by infill with construction waste. It also has permission for waste recycling with the objective of maximising recycling and putting the reject materials into the quarry. The existing planning permission runs until March 2028, another 4 years, but it's not possible, given the limit of 16 movements per day, for the quarry to be excavated and restored over this timescale. An application to extend the life of the quarry would therefore be necessary, because otherwise you'd be left with a large hole in the ground and no means of restoring it. Until the end of March 2028 and probably beyond, the quarry traffic will continue to use Kirklees Moore Road and the wider road network beyond. There's no provision in the current planning permission for any highways contribution. Quarry traffic would also have to continue to use the bridleway with the resultant conflict with bridleway users. This planning application offers the opportunity to construct a separate access road, leaving the bridleway to walkers and horse riders. It also brings with it a significant annual contribution to the upkeep of Kirklees Moore Road and the wider road network. It would enable the access road to be properly constructed in tarmac with an effective wheel bath. The increase to 30 HGV movements per day works out at an average increase of just under 1 movement every 45 minutes of the working day. It's also worth noting that HGVs from Hillhouse Edge Quarry and local farms and other businesses use Kirklees Moore Road and the rest of the local road network. Both the Environment Agency and Environmental Health are satisfied that infilling the quarry would not cause pollution and contamination to the locality. It would also the infill will be subject to the exacting requirements of an environmental permit. Much has been made of Greenbelt in the officer's report, but almost all quarries in West Yorkshire are in the Greenbelt. You would not want them in an urban area. Mineral working is not inappropriate development, and neither is anything such as access roads and soil mounds. Both are necessary to a quarry. Openness is preserved by the requirement to restore the land. I would respectfully ask that the committee grants permission in accordance with the planning officer's recommendation. I am available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question. It was mentioned that lorry traffic it doesn't need to go south on Kirklees Moore Road. Going the other way, you end up in the middle of Holmfirth, which is not a very good idea at all. But something was said about having a separate alignment for lorries compared with the bridleway. I'm not quite clear where that is. I wonder if you could show us, please.
Through you, Chair. So the proposals are to... The proposals include the creation of a new access road onto Kirklees Moore Road. The existing quarry uses the is served by the access which is also a formal bridleway. It's proposed to be conditioned that there will be no increase in HEV movements to 30 until the proposed new access road is completed and made operational.
Can I just ask though that the Kirklees Moore Road extends? I don't know how far it goes. It's probably a kilometre, I suspect, before it joins the road that comes round. That's at a lower level. And I noticed that when we were up there the last time we visited this site, it was in an absolutely dreadful state, being churned up by lorries. But it's not proposed that that part of the road is bypassed. They would still be using that part of the road, but it would be restored or mended or whatever.
Yes, through you, Chair, yes. So this is the plan showing Cartworth Moore Road. You have the application site here. That's a new proposed road there. The HGV traffic will be going down south along Cartworth Moore Road, where it joins there to Whitegate Road, I think it is. Yeah, so it's proposed to remediate initially any works to Cartworth Moore Road at the cost of the applicant, including 2 passing places at the bottom section of Cartworth Moore Road here, and then 6 monthly inspections, which will be at the cost of the applicant.
I'm just a bit worried about how long repairs to this road do actually last, because if it's not a hard metal surface underneath, which I don't think it is, then after a while it is going to get churned up. I would have thought, simply by the weight of the vehicles. How long is it that between repairs that have got to be done here?
Ryan, yeah.
Through you, Chair. As Fazan has said, the new point of access is going to be maybe half a mile from the existing bridleway back down Cartworth Moore Road. They'll come out of the proposed site access and turn right. Now, when you went on the previous committee site visit, Cartworth Moore Road itself, that unmade, in-maintained character track was in a dreadful state. Since then, some works have been carried out at the expense of the applicant to bring that up to a reasonable standard, but still maintained in character. That's an ongoing issue that has been conditioned. As well as the 6 monthly inspection, should it be brought to the Council's attention that there's any defects, they'll be rectified at the expense of the applicant also. That'll be dealt with by condition. So the regular maintenance of Cartworth Moore Road will be maintained. Does that answer your question? Thank you, Chair.
Just for clarity, those works are all going to be secured through a Section 106 legal agreement, not condition.
Thanks. Can I just ask, in terms of the conditions, so obviously you've mentioned about the second access not being, sort of needing to be completed before further HGVs are on the site, and I know there's some comments in the objections around the use of the site already, that there's more HGVs than there should be on the site. I'm just wondering if we can condition in that there's some sort of recording of vehicles that are entering and leaving the site, so there's a record of, you know, so we know, so there's evidence of that.
So a condition can be imposed for the use of monitoring equipment to record any HGVs coming in and out the site. I'm not sure what monitoring equipment that would be at this stage.
I don't even know whether it has to be equipment or just a record of which vehicles have come and gone from the site.
If I may, Chair. Yeah, maybe in the condition we can require a scheme, so vehicles can be recorded entering and leaving the site, and that can be worked up with the applicants.
I think if that's possible,
that'd be an additional condition if the committee wishes.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, there is another issue which I think there will be vehicles from other quarries using the Cartworth Moore Road as well as other local vehicles. Is it accepted that this applicant has got to foot the bill for repairs caused by anybody using that road?
Sorry, could you just repeat that again, Councillor? So I didn't quite catch that.
Well, as I understand it, there's another quarry further north, and there's also traffic, you know, agricultural traffic and so on that may use the southern end of Kirklees Moore Road, thus adding to the wear and tear. So this applicant footing the bill for all of that?
Through you, Chair. Historically, applications in the vicinity of this site have not secured any funding, but moving forward, we've secured it from this site because it's become apparent that there's deterioration on Kirklees Moore Road, so we've picked that up best we can to be dealt with. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any other comments? Just want to move? So Councillor Pinnock's moved approval. Are you seconding that, Councillor Sokol?
Can I just check, is that with the additional condition about recording that was mentioned? Yeah.
Thank you. Should we go to the vote on that then?
So just to be clear, you are voting on the recommendation that was set out in the update, which also includes an additional condition about restriction on HGV movements and also the additional condition about recording that was just proposed. Councillor Sokol?
For.
Councillor Anwar?
For.
Councillor Pinnock?
For.
Councillor Armour?
For.
Councillor Homewood?
For.
That's carried unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we're on to the last item, which is a pre-application for New Mills Marsden. Victor.
Thank you, Chair. Victor Grayson, Development Management Master Planner. This is item 14, which relates to a pre-application inquiry relating to a mixed-use development at New Mills Marsden, a version of which has been awarded £5.6 million of levelling up funding from the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, DLUC, in March 2023. So members, you'll know that the Council provides a pre-application advice service for parties who intend to submit applications to the Council. Through this service, officers provide advice on the relevant planning issues, how they may be considered at application stage, and also on what would need to be submitted in support of a planning application. We don't often bring pre-application inquiries to committee. The last was the Cultural Heart scheme in 2022, but we do sometimes bring schemes that are particularly complicated or involve a lot of planning issues, require a lot of explaining, or have far-reaching implications and or are likely to attract a lot of public interest. For those kind of schemes, it's often worth introducing a site, its challenges and the emerging proposals to members at this early pre-app stage, which is what we're doing here. So this pre-application inquiry relates to this site. The site is outlined in red. The blue line also shows land owned by the pre-applicant, which is the Crowther family. The site is bounded by Brown Road, Crowther Bruce Mill Road, Warehouse Hill Road and Derby Terrace. This is an aerial view of the site. Members can see that it's almost entirely covered by existing buildings of varying ages. It's a valley bottom site, approximately 1.5 hectares in size, and members probably can't make out, but where there's trees along the north edge of part of the site, that's where the River Colne runs alongside existing buildings, and it then runs beneath existing buildings downstream eastwards until it re-emerges on the other side of Crowther Bruce Mill Road there. There are existing problems in the centre of Marsden, members might know. There's a bin collection problem at Derby Terrace, there's parking problems in the village centre, just to provide some context to the immediate vicinity of this pre-application site. Apologies members, all these designations are in different shades of blue, but the shading that covers most of the image, that's the Marsden Conservation Area. The outline that I'm just highlighting with the pointer there, that's the Marsden District Centre, also outlined in blue. other outlines in blue that you hopefully can make out are listed buildings. The nearest to the pre-application site is just up here. Those are the tenter posts just to the north of the pre-application site that we're seeing on the site visit this morning. Also, the committee site visit bus went past around the corner around the front and side of the Mazda Mechanics Hall. That's also grade 2 listed. And then the dark blue lines across the site here, they're watercourses, and you can see as well as the River Colne, there's also another watercourse that comes into the site running downhill from south to north, again underneath buildings, and it joins the River Colne underneath buildings within the site. The site is allocated for mixed-use development. That's site allocation MXS 11. The site allocation sets out an expectation of 29 dwellings and just under 3,000 square metres of employment floor space. You can see, members, the text here flags up some of the site's constraints, including in relation to flood risk and the Marsden Conservation Area. This is the text continued. It sets out here site-specific considerations. It mentions flood risk. Deculverting of the River Colne is expected where possible. This is also mentioned in policy LP 27 in the local plan. There's mention of residential amenity that needs to be protected here. And there's also mentioned that the site's existing buildings should be retained unless their loss is justified. This plan numbers the various buildings on the site. The same image is in the committee report. It's just helpful to identify the buildings. So the eastern mill that we looked at on the site visit this morning, that's number 1 on this plan. The western mill is numbers 7 and 20. And those two mill buildings are the most prominent buildings on this site in longer views. These contribute positively to the character and appearance of the conservation area, as do their associated towers and the bridges between those buildings. Buildings 3 and 4 fronting Brougham Road are also positive contributors. Other buildings make less of a contribution to the conservation area's character and appearance. And apologies, this is a Google image view, but they came out better than my site photos. This is a view of the site from Brougham Road, showing the eastern mill, including the impressive elevation, the western mill, including the impressive elevation of the former wages office fronting Brougham Road, and also the eastern mill and the bridges. And you can probably just make out the hillside behind those bridges with cattle grazing on them, as seen this morning. Another Google image, this time from the north from Warehouse Mill Road, again showing the eastern and western mills. I should mention that a planning permission was previously granted for development of part of this site in 2006. This is one of the approved drawings from that application. That permission was not implemented and it has since expired. But it's worth noting that that approved scheme included demolition of the eastern mill, which is about where I'm hovering with the pointer now. And it also included demolition of buildings at the west end of the site. Those are lower rise buildings behind buildings on Peel Street and Derby Terrace. A vehicular entrance was approved off Brougham Road, and that application also included additional land to the south of Brougham Road, which was to be used for parking. Those proposals also involved making that part of Brougham Road one way, with traffic running from west to east. And so I'll just very quickly run through the options for this site that the applicant team or pre-applicant team have considered, just for members' information. It's not an invitation for members to pick their favourite, it's just background information. Option 1 isn't illustrated here because it is a do-nothing option. But this is option 2. This is a heritage-led scheme. You'll note the retention of the 2 largest mill buildings on the site and also buildings 3 and 4 fronting Brougham Road. Spot the difference between each of these that I can always toggle back if need be. This is option 3, referred to by the pre-applicant team as minimal heritage loss, involving part demolition of building 3 to widen the access off Brougham Road. Option 4 was also considered by the applicant team, referred to here as modest heritage loss. It does involve the demolition of the eastern mill and part of building 3. This is option 4, option 5. This is the scheme upon which the DLUC decision toward funding was based. It involves the demolition of the eastern mill, the southern part of the western mill, and other buildings on the site. I will skip option 6 for the minute because I'll come back to that, but for now this is option 7, an alternative option considered by the applicant, which involves more demolition of the western mill but retention of the eastern mill, and a new building erected to the frontage on Brougham Road. Obviously all the other options included erection of new buildings and provision of car parking on the site as well. Of all of these options that I've shown so far, all involve demolition of most of the buildings above the River Colne. However, deculverting of the river was not proposed in those options. The concrete base would be retained over the river. Some variations of these options, called options 4A and 6A, have also been looked into by the pre-applicant team. They amend the phasing and consider mothballing parts of the site to ascertain whether or not that would improve the viability of those schemes. But this is option 6. This is the pre-applicant team's preferred option, the option that they want to take forward. It involves the demolition of the eastern mill, although retention of the what's called here the coal house to the north of that eastern mill. The southern part of the western mill will be demolished, as would other buildings. Vehicular access is proposed from Brougham Road, and as members can see in the turquoise blocks, those are new buildings that are proposed across the site, and other areas will be dedicated to car parking. Members can see in the bottom left-hand corner the mix of uses proposed, including 21 flats in the retained part of the western mill, and light industrial, retail and offices are proposed in the new and retained buildings. Lots of figures here just to give members an idea of what those various options would deliver, and also an indication of what the viability situation is with each of those options. The pre-applicant team have said that we can share these figures with you, the viability figures, that is. Members can see that according to the pre-applicant team, the various options deliver or would deliver various numbers of jobs and various amounts of economic activity indicated by the GVA measure. Regarding viability, members can see that almost all options are currently unviable to varying degrees. Regarding option 6, the applicant team are currently looking into how that funding gap can be bridged. And just to finish, there's a couple of sketched images of option 6 that the applicants have submitted with their pre-application inquiry. This is the view from the south. This is Brougham Road. 03 is the new building that would replace the southern end of the western mill building. That's where the committee site visit bus stopped today. 07 is the retained buildings 3 and 4. They were numbered in those earlier images. And then this is a sketched view of the emerging scheme, the option 6 scheme from the north, with a footbridge proposed across the River Colne from Warehouse Mill Road to the north, and you can see the northern part of the western mill retained in this option, as well as the engine house of that mill building and its tower. Members, I could talk at length regarding the many planning issues relevant to this site and relevant to a redevelopment proposal here. However, paragraph 10.1 of the committee report provides a very brief list of the most important issues, and those are the issues that will need to inform any proposal brought forward at this site. At this stage, though, I will emphasise that this site involves or faces significant challenges in relation to access and highways matters, heritage and viability. There is, however, also potential for significant public benefits arising from the redevelopment of this site, including job creation, positive economic impacts, enhancement of the district centre, which you saw, members, is right next to this site, and bringing a large accessible brownfield site back into use. It's also relevant to note that no development has happened at the site in the 20+ years since woolen production ceased here, despite a planning permission being issued in 2006. So, members, it's likely that at application stage there will need to be a careful balancing of planning considerations where the public benefits of the scheme are weighed against its shortcomings and harm. What that balance will involve is yet to be confirmed. That depends a lot on what scheme is brought forward at application stage and what comments consultees and local residents make. In the meantime, however, Comments and questions from members on the emerging proposals are welcomed. No decision needs to be made today. However, points raised by members today will need to be noted by the pre-applicant team as they continue working up their proposals. And through you, Chair, if I may now hand over to the applicant to briefly expand on some of the key issues relevant to the proposed development. Thank you.
Yeah, so we've got Matthew. Is it Matthew Shepherd? Yeah, Matthew Shepherd, you've got 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I might need a few more than 3 minutes if that's okay, but I will certainly keep it brief. So, Chair, councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. We're obviously still at pre-application stage, so we're really keen to hear your feedback on where we've got to. Crowther family have owned New Mills for generations, and they've been on a long journey with this site. The buildings are falling further into disrepair. It's becoming a major liability both for them and also for Marsden. The local people we've spoken to over the last few days really want to see something positive happening here. So there was a proposal that Victor's mentioned to redevelop part of the site in the early 2000s. That would have seen the demolition of most of the western part of the site, but it would have delivered a new doctor's surgery, converted the western mill into apartments, some office space and some other retail-based uses. But unfortunately that didn't progress, and the site's been vacant and deteriorating for about 20 years. The applicant has looked at a number of options to try and bring this forward. These are set out in the report. I won't go through them again, but the basic process we've been through has been to start from a position of retaining as many of the older buildings as possible and then amending our approach successively until we can find a solution that we think can work financially. So heritage has been a driving factor in developing these options, but we acknowledge that there's more work to do on this with your Conservation Officer and Historic England. So the family's been working with the council to secure government funding to help plug the viability challenge in bringing this site forward, and we're now working with your heritage planning and other officers to bring forward the best proposal that we can, but it is a delicate balancing exercise. You probably will have seen both local and national press coverage about this site, and the reporting is focused on the viability issues. This is a major concern for us. Basically, if we can't make it work financially, then the default option will be to do nothing, which will probably lead to the buildings falling down, becoming even more of an eyesore and just becoming a liability for everyone. So that isn't a great outcome for the applicant or for Marsden, and we really want to avoid that happening. So the viability testing that we've done so far shows a shortfall on nearly all of those options, but some are much worse than others. Our objective is to find a balance that meets the main concerns of your Conservation Officer, Historic England, but also responds to what people in Marsden want to see. But fundamentally, it needs to be as close to being viable as possible. So our currently preferred scheme has a modest financial shortfall, and we believe that a combination of further funding, improved economic conditions, and flexibility in uses and phasing can help to bridge that gap. The applicant has a funding specialist working on securing more funding now to help move this forward, and we need to find some level of consensus on what should happen with the site to enable that to be taken forward. So we're hopeful that improving economic conditions will help to reduce financing costs. You'll have seen the headlines this week that inflation is now back on target, which will positively affect borrowing and building costs. We've also have some further technical work to do, which we hope will improve some cost assumptions and give us a better understanding of what's in the ground and the construction risks we're facing. So a large part of the current applicant team worked on Sunnybank Mills in Leeds. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. It's where the Great British Sewing Bee has been filmed. That's on the TV at the moment. What we found there was that as the scheme developed, we were able to find uses that reduced conversion costs. But it would have been difficult to model those in a normal financial viability way, but it helped us find a way through the viability issues that mill conversions present to us. But it was incremental and it happened over time. So we hope that the same sort of process can assist with bridging the viability gaps in this case. That's why we've chosen an option with a modest funding gap. The cost difference is minimal, so those minor changes could help us to bridge that gap as we work on delivering the proposal. We don't expect to achieve large financial changes by doing that, but we are confident that we can make option 6 work. The ideal scenario from a policy perspective would be to retain as many of the current mill structures as possible. The viability gap in those heritage-led options is so great that we don't think that approach will work. We're not going to save tens of millions of pounds from changes in inflation, for example. So whilst it's unlikely that public funding on that scale would be available, that still remains an avenue that we're continuing to explore. So we need a good amount of commercial new build space to deliver the economic outputs that we need to help secure more funding. Most importantly, the new build elements help us fund the conversion aspects of the projects, which are the greatest financial challenge presented by this site. You'll also be aware that we held a public consultation event yesterday. I thought it would be useful to give you some headline feedback from that. So, as you might expect, many people are worried about the traffic implications and parking, both of which are existing problems in Marsden. A few people wanted to see the retention of as many mill buildings as possible, but equally some thought they should just be demolished. We really had some very useful inputs on the type of uses that people would like to see here, particularly including space for the creative industries, affordable office space, and a small local heritage museum. Most people recognise that the ultimate outcome, though, has to work financially. There are going to be differences of opinion on how to approach a prominent site like this, but the overriding feedback that we got from members of the public was that there's a general desire to see something done here before the buildings deteriorate further and potentially fall down. So this site does present us with a very difficult balancing exercise, and we'd really value your inputs on how to take this forward. The solution has to be viable and deliverable, otherwise it simply won't happen. And the applicant is trying to find the optimal solution here, which will deliver some building conversion, retain the most important buildings, and minimise the impact of that change on the character of the area. We know that the ideal solution, which would be to convert all of the mill space, raises some concerns about traffic and parking effects. It almost certainly isn't going to be affordable without a major change in funding availability for us. So our preferred option is to find the best way forward, to be positive about securing more funding, to work with the market and try to benefit from recent economic improvements. That is the best approach that we think we can adopt to help us meet the objectives of the local plan and to minimise the heritage concerns that come from demolishing buildings in the conservation area. And we're aiming to create something positive for Marsden here, a solution that brings new jobs and investment to the local economy and dealing with the long-standing issue of what will happen to these rapidly deteriorating buildings. We want to make a positive difference here, but we can't offer an idealised solution as it's just not viable. We do need to move things forward quite quickly as well in order to keep the funding we already have. And as I said, this is a delicate balancing exercise. There's a lot of work for us to do with your planning, conservation and regeneration officers, but we're keen to work with them and try and find the right solution for this site. So the main reason for us being here today is to see what you think and to allow us to work with your concerns if we can before you're asked to determine a planning application on the site. So we'd really value your inputs on what we need to do to help this proposal get planning permission. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience allowing me to run over, Chair. It's much appreciated. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
No problem at all. Councillor McCarthy, do you want to speak on this item? Yep. Okay.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, councillors. I'm hoping that good things come to those who wait. Yeah, you've unfortunately not saved the best speaker until last. I think just to start, I'd like to thank the council officers and the developers for the work they put into this, and also the opportunity to speak and make comments on this before it goes to a full application. That's greatly appreciated, and the earlier we can iron out these issues is a massive benefit. Fundamentally, this is a great opportunity for Marsden. We've just finished a place-standard engagement in Marsden called What Matters to Marsden, which involved community groups with support from councillors and council officers, having conversations with 603 people who live in, work in or visit Marsden about what life is like in the village. 603 conversations is a massive achievement in a village of just over 4,000 people. And one of the big themes that came out of that engagement was there are two big unused mill complexes in the centre of the village, New Mills on Brougham Road and Bank Bottom Mill, which are currently unsafe, eyesores and a waste of valuable space right in the centre of the village. This is also an issue that matters a lot to me personally. My great-grandfather worked for the Crowthers in Marsden, and my granddad also grew up in Marsden, before founding a successful textile business of his own. This investment is going to be a real positive, and it's going to bring much needed jobs and housing into Marsden and the wider Kirklees area. However, I do have some comments that I think I need to make about this development based upon the concerns that were raised as part of the place planning engagement, and also those that people have raised with me in the community, and ones that I have myself from my experience as a ward councillor. Before I do that, I think we do need to acknowledge, however, that any scheme for the redevelopment of this site has to be considered against what's called option one, doing nothing. Doing nothing means actively deciding to allow the mills to continue to decay and actively leaving what is effectively a massive hole in the centre of an otherwise thriving village. We do need to do everything we can possibly can to kind of avoid that option, because one of the things that comes out when you speak to Marsden is, please can we just do something about this? There is kind of an urgency there. We also need to be careful that there isn't a false start. Under the last Labour government, it's not exclusively related to the mill developments, but there was funding for regeneration projects in the Cone Valley as part of the Marsden Slough Renaissance Initiative. Unfortunately, this funding was withdrawn after the government changed in 2010. The opportunity really is now, and we can't afford to lose that. So the first point that I'd like to make is this development has to be well integrated into the Marsden Master Plan. And it's positive to hear that the Master Plan is being developed in parallel for the proposals for new mill, as it says on page 162 of the report. The Master Plan will set out a long-term vision for the village, addressing the priorities that Marsdeners and experts themselves have drawn up, and acting as a blueprint to influence future investment into the local area. It's important that residents feel like their voices have been heard, particularly when they've just been consulted on as part of what matters to Marsden, and also they're going to be consulted again as part of the blueprint process. And it's also important that the development is integrated with other exciting things that are happening in the village, such as the improvements to Marsden Station as part of the Transpine route upgrade, and the place and action plan which has been drawn up as a result of what matters to Marsden. For anyone that knows Marsden, it'll come as no surprise that traffic and parking were the worst rated of all the themes in what matters to Marsden, and also at some of the top issues cited by residents. Like a lot of village centres, Marsden was not built for the current volume of traffic that travels through it. Brougham Road already has a huge number of issues with parking that residents often bear the brunt of, and there's often inadequate space for two vehicles to pass through the road. In particular as well, the junction of Brougham Road and Peel Street by the Mechanics Hall isn't really suitable for large vehicles or pedestrians who have to often walk into the middle of the road. These problems aren't insolvable, but they do need to be addressed. And so far it's been positive, I think, to see the developer, council officers and the local community working together to try and address some of these issues and discuss them. Highways are one area in which it's absolutely vital, for example, that any actions that are taken are linked up with the master plan, because there has to be a much more strategic whole village approach to tackling these issues. Although it is a little bit concerning that council officers have looked at the proposals for parking and found a shortfall in the preferred option 6, and I do think that, again, we need to really make sure that any development doesn't kind of contribute to existing issues, and also not contributing to those problems that have been caused that are already there in the village and making them worse. Another consideration would be heritage. I think Matthew's really gone for that very well. Although the buildings aren't listed, they do form an important part of the industrial heritage of the Cone Valley and the landscape of the Cone Valley. The challenge of fully maintaining all these buildings is huge, and any scheme doesn't be viable. I think anyone who knows the site well will tell you that it's incredibly difficult to fully convert these buildings. However, we should try and preserve as much of the existing buildings as possible while ensuring the scheme is viable. If there is still a viability problem with the development at the end of the day, and we do have to try and seek extra funding, we should try and use that extra funding to try and kind of address the heritage considerations as far as possible. However, even considering that, we do have to really be honest here and say that retention of all the buildings is very likely not going to be possible as a result of this. And that's incredibly sad to say, but if we start from the proposal of trying to save as many of these buildings as possible, that'll have a massive improvement to the development. And the very final thing, and this is the final thing so you can get home in time for the football, would be just about housing. This is a kind of a little bit of a hobby horse of mine, but I would slightly push back against the idea that there isn't a demand for flats in Marsden, which has been mentioned. I think there's a demand for housing, all types of housing, in every part of Kirklees and also in the Cone Valley. Again, the scheme does have to be viable, but I will always push for kind of more affordable housing for people within this site. And that is, there's a million things I could say about this, Chair, but I'll keep it as short as possible so people can get and watch England thrash Denmark.
Councillor Swackon.
Yeah, very briefly. I want to watch for England today, 5 o'clock, yeah. Yeah, I actually welcome the scheme, yeah. Sorry, my glasses are gone. Welcome the scheme, yeah, to improve this building, which is very large building and right in the big center of the Marsden village. When I got this morning on the site visit, so I saw the building is very, very poor condition, yeah, all around, yeah, and I actually welcome these people working on to improve this building alongside with our local councillor. This is a big thing, yeah. Can I ask you, I know it's not a listed building, yeah, it's not a listed building, but can we, there are still some heritage feature on the building. When we are thinking, and Councillor Penny-White agree with me, there are men on the side of, on the front side, yeah, and where there's a metal gate, yeah, look through the two buildings, there is a linkage, I think called bridge or I don't know, link two buildings each other, it looks like a very heritage, yeah. Can we retain or not? Or is any value of that?
Make your comments, Councillor, and then we'll come back to anything. Yeah. Councillor Pinnock, do you want to?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I had not had a close look at this building before I went on the site visit this morning, and the things that you notice on first glance, the entrance front to that building, is it building 7 on this plan, is really quite nice, but I gather that building is, in most of the options, is due for demolition. The other thing you notice is these very odd looking walkways from one building to the other. All right, they are not architectural gems, but they are weird, and on that basis, interesting. Now, I'm not suggesting that you make a feature of these things, but I do think that some proper architectural photographic recording should be done before buildings are demolished, because we do lose a lot of stuff like that you have to depend on random photographs that people might have taken in the past. But I think it should at least be considered that this is done. I know they're not listed buildings, but as part of the townscape of Marsden, it has the inestimable benefit of being right in the centre, and therefore likely to be seen by quite a lot of people who, for whatever reason, wander into the village and have a look round and see this, and they will be struck by all sorts of features that they see. But certainly the other things that I noticed was that this frontage that I've already mentioned, and then when we went round the back, the archway is an engine house next to the end of the Western Mill. Really very nice feature. Actually, I think that's down to be saved in most of these plans. But really attractive building. I'm fully aware of the fact that you can't just do up what's there. Something has got to change. But the important thing, as Harry kind of alluded to, Marsden has got really good communications with the outside world, And sorry, that sounds awful, really. I didn't mean it to come over like that. But it's got really good communications. People can go there and look at, and you know, maybe live there. Yes, I think flats are probably a good idea in such a location. And I think it would work with the right sort of marketing. Yes, it would. And one of the important things about Kirklees is given that it's a rather miscellaneous sort of place, we do need to look after a very wide range of different sorts of places, from Marsden at one end to Cleckheaton at the other end. So it could be quite exciting, I think, this. But you know, one needs to carry as many people as possible with you at once to convince them that what you're doing is A, feasible, and B, what they would actually like.
Yeah, so my comments would just be sort of on similar themes. It might have just been from where we were looking at it today, but from the sort of entrance between the buildings that were down as number 1 and number 7, number 20, and the bridges and things, that seemed to be the kind of key feature in the building 7 onto the front with the architecture, and obviously those seem to be the bits that are being removed out of the plan. So that might be because that's essential, you know, in terms of access into the site and whatever, which I understand that it would be good just to understand that. And then my kind of thinking, going back to these bridges and things like that, is I'm not entirely sure, based on what we've seen so far. Obviously we're protecting some of the heritage assets, but actually for the bits that's new, what's the plan there? Are they intended to be new, innovative? How are they intended to actually interact with the what's there today? Will there be elements, if, for example, if those bridges presumably are removed, will there be a nod to that somewhere in the design, or is that, or are you going, or is it something entirely different? I think I'm not saying either he was right or wrong, but it would be good to understand, like, to think about that, and obviously to get people's engagement on that design, because I'm sure people will have very different views on that. On the parking and things, I mean, that, I guess there's an opportunity there to potentially look at how that can be resolved to a degree. Obviously, it looks like access is difficult, so obviously probably some changes needed to the road layouts, whether it's one-way systems, etc. But I noticed on the previous plans there was some additional parking provisions. We also went around the corner and noticed apparently there's a large bit of land which is also in the same ownership that's not part of the scheme, which looks like to be a large car park, but there's no cars in it, so that was interesting. Don't know if anything can be done to utilise that, and I think thinking about, given the traffic and parking issues, it would, you know, good to think about it holistically from a community perspective, not just, you know, X number of parking spaces required for the number of residential units or office units. You know, how can we actually, is there anything we can do to actually think about the entirety of that, whatever the road's called, Brian Lane, is it? And the surrounding area. So that are my thoughts. But yeah, I know that Councillor Sokol asked specifically about the bridges and the heritage stuff. I don't know if there's anything you want to come back on that.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there was a few points in there. I think, you know, obviously we're at early stages. We're at the pre-application stage. There's a lot of technical work to be done yet, just about the principles of where we are. So there's room to work with everything that all of you are saying at the moment. When on some of the specifics, taking the easy one first, this kind of idea of preserving by record, so taking a proper photographic record of the buildings that are there, is something that's it's well accepted in the world of archaeology, and why not in the world of built heritage as well. I think that's something we could very easily do for anything that's coming down. Actually get somebody proper out there doing surveys and taking photos. I don't think that would be a big problem at all. We had somebody yesterday afternoon say, could really do with a little Marsden museum. That would be the kind of place where you could show that. You know, even if it's a very small space within the mills that moves around as stuff gets used within the buildings, it's something that is easily done, very little cost to us, but is useful and interesting for the people of Marsden and the people who visit Marsden, because there's lots of people who come in, and that's partly where some of the parking issues come from as well. So I know you've just mentioned parking, Chair. I mean, that again, that is something that we're going to have to work with Mr. Darwin and his team on. We're already having discussions around all of that and how much we can get on the site, how it will work. So there's stuff to be done, there's stuff to sort out. We've heard that point from people who live in Marsden, and that's the main audience that we need to convince, I think, that this can all work. So going back to the specific questions about the bridges and the nice architectural features that are on the wages office, and yes, you're quite right, on the drawings as we have them at the moment, those are due to come down. It's very difficult to preserve the bridge structures if you're taking out the thing that they are bridging to. So there's just a practical point to manage there. The kind of the more ornate front on the wages office, on I think which is building 7, I think, so right by the metal gates. That was exactly the first thing I said as well. Oh, that's quite nice. Can't we be keeping that? And I don't know if you took the time to kind of look up the building when you were there, but that bit of building is in a pretty poor state of repair at the moment. There's all sorts of bits of steel and pins holding it together. We haven't done the full structural survey of that yet, but it is not in a good way, and the Crowther family have been pinning it up basically to stop it falling on people walking down Brougham Road. So there is a major structural point to manage there. But that's not to say that it's impossible if that's the way that things fall. It's not what we think is the right answer, partly because you've got a building right next to it which is in a good state of repair, and you need to widen that opening into the site to get vehicles in and out. Because you'll have seen it is quite narrow at the moment. And we're not talking about putting HGVs in there or anything. We think because of the nature of the site and where it is, it's going to have to be uses that are limited to your kind of transit vans, box vans, and probably not much bigger than that, really, because you just can't get it to work. And there is a point to be dealt with around circulation and parking, and as Councillor McCarthy said, working that in with the proposals that are being put forward elsewhere in Marsden to make sure that it's all thought about as a whole. That's really important, and it's and from a purely selfish perspective, that will help us make it work with what else is happening in Marsden. So that's a positive thing from our perspective. So I think the simple answer is we might not be able to retain all of that. I think your Conservation Officer and Historic England have got some hoops for us to jump through to get to that point. It might be that we can't get through those hoops, but there's a process to be followed there that we're engaged with at the moment. If there are bits of nice building or stonework that has to come down, and it's agreed that they can come down, then there's no reason why that can't be reused somewhere in the redevelopment of the rest of the site as a nod to that history. It's not the ideal solution from a heritage perspective, but you could do something with it, whether it's signage or landscaping or something, features built into the ground in hard surfacing, whatever it is, there will be something that can be done to manage those. So I think I picked up on all of the points that were raised. If I've missed any, please let me know.
Well, thanks, I think you have. So I think, welcome to I think it sounds like the summary is that it's really interesting plans. I think people are broadly supportive of doing something on that site. Like you say, if we don't do anything, they'll fall down eventually, or just become dangerous, or more dangerous. It's probably dangerous already. So yeah, I think that's the case. And Rich, have you got enough back from that in terms of?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's been really useful. Thanks, members. Thanks, the applicant team.
Great. Thanks everyone for coming. We'll close the meeting. Appreciate it.